Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.
Hey, it's Matt from the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur here. Thanks again for listening to the DTVC podcast. Before we jump in, I wanted to quickly let you know that my new novel, A Girl and a Gun, is available on Amazon now, both on Kindle and paperback. It follows Justin, a successful writer whose past as a scriptwriter for a fetish porn site comes back to haunt him and threatens to derail his career. As he's picking up the pieces, he gets an opportunity to make a movie called A Girl and a Gun with a rom-com star. Justin may have bitten off more than he can chew, though, because she's notoriously difficult to work with. If you're interested, you can find the link on our webpage, along with the link to my first novel, Chad in Accounting. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I thank you for the support. Now, on to the podcast. Welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I am joined by a very special guest. I've got John Cross from the After Movie Diner. Also, if you just listened to our theme song, when the episode came in, he was the one who created that theme song. Also has his miscellaneous plumbing fixture. Should I call it a group? It's kind of now a group, isn't it? You've got people that perform with you when you do miscellaneous plumbing fixtures.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes. So I'm a big fan of the band The Mountain Goats.
Yeah.
For people who don't know, that started as John Darnielle recording on a boombox and releasing tape cassettes back in the 90s. And then slowly over time, he's added band members. But he still is referred to as The Mountain Goats, whether the band plays on the album or not, whether the whole band plays on the album, whether the band on the album then also has additional musicians, whatever. It's always under the banner header of The Mountain Goats. And, you know, a bit like not at all like, I was going to say a bit like Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. Not at all like that. Other than the E Street Band are one thing and Bruce Springsteen is the other, and Bruce Springsteen is the unifying element, right? So I am Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. I've always been Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. I have done some albums in the last 2 or 3 years that have collaborators on it. And there are a core group of collaborators that are essentially the Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures if we were ever to call ourselves a band. And then there are additional collaborators that even before I was doing whole albums with collaborators, they may have played on like 1 or 2 songs. So it's sort of an ad hoc group of, in fact, I'm going to throw my Apple Watch across the fucking, because I didn't say anything. I didn't say Siri. I didn't say anything like that. And it's still talking back at me. Piece of shit. I just threw it down. Sorry about that, people. You didn't get to see that, but I threw my iWatch down on my Apple Watch. Why do they call it the iWatch? It's now the Apple Watch, but it's an iPhone. Why wasn't it the iWatch? Anyway, I threw my Apple Watch down the thing because Siri was about to interrupt and destroy my flow. So we're a ragtag band of gypsy minstrels. I don't even think you can say that anymore. Romani minstrels, even though none of us are Romanian or of Eastern European descent. Well, I'm of Eastern European. Anyway, I'm going down a whole quagmire. We are a traveling band of musicians who occasionally collaborate, but the last few things I've put out have been just me. I have about 7 or 8 songs that have been sat on ice for almost a year that has some of my collaborators on it, but not all. And I'm waiting for some people to add some stuff to it. I have another batch of about 8 songs that come Bandcamp Friday. Hopefully next week is the first Bandcamp Friday back of 2022. They're doing September, October, November, December. And I hope to have a release for each of those. So there should be 4 more miscellaneous plumbing fixtures releases coming up. September 2nd, go to bandcamp.com, look up Miss Plumbing Fixtures, and you will find me and a new release. And then October, whatever it is, that should be hopefully when the collaborator album finally drops. And then, or maybe I'll do that in November. So October, maybe I'll do like a horror themed album, maybe a horror movie themed album, or maybe a Pleasant Sing 3. Yes. If I can pull out 10 more tracks about our Lord and Savior, Donald Pleasance. Who knows? And then December, listen, I already have a Christmas album that every time I release a Christmas single, I kind of add to it. So it's an ever-growing Christmas album. Maybe I'll just write a whole new Christmas album. Who knows? So anyway, 4 more months of miscellaneous plumbing fixtures releases coming soon. And the After Movie Diner, we have one more episode. One more episode.
Wow. And
that may or may not be, Matt, as I'm trying to drum up some sort of excitement, that may or may not be our last ever episode. I'm trying to drum up some of that. What do you mean the After Movie Diner is going away? Said 2 people you've never heard of. Who are the last 2 people who are still listening? But no, we loved content every 6 months when John could be bothered to put some out. No, truth of the matter is, man, I bought my own home. That's what it is.
Which is exciting.
In the midst of economic turmoil and the downfall of society, I waded into the housing market bravely and bought my own home. And to be honest, Matt, best decision I've ever made. It has allowed me, as I said, in the midst of the Detroitus of the 21st century, to find a little peace. Sorry, I just hit my mic there. To find a little peace, to have a place for my movies, for my music, for my flamboyant dancing, for my dangerous cooking, and for my small burrowing animal torturing that I like to do. So it gave me an avenue for all of those things. And best decision ever, Matt, because I can just find my corner of the universe and be like, I'll be over here. The rest of you can go fuck up whatever it is you're trying to fuck up. Argue about whatever it is you're arguing about. I'm going to be over here watching Cynthia Rothrock movies and eating my body weight in M&Ms and Doritos.
Now, one thing I should point out, I think this episode will have, by the time people are listening to this, it'll probably be after the September Bandcamp. But if I hopefully will have the link to your Bandcamp in the details of this podcast, so people, if they get this on, I'm not as good with the podcatchers. I think it's iTunes, Spotify, and I think Stitcher. But you should really go into the details and be like, okay, there's the link to Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures Bandcamp. Click on that. That'll get you there. And and I will say too, for people, if you miss the Bandcamp Friday, don't let that stop you from buying on a non-Bandcamp, unless you want to save up and do extra buying on the October.
Yeah,
Bandcamp, right?
save up, and on October, whatever it is, I don't know what the first Friday of October is, but whatever the first Friday of October is, save up and buy both albums, because there will be the September album, or as Matt says, go buy it anytime. Just remember that if it's not a Bandcamp Friday, Bandcamp, they're not greedy, but they take just shy of 1%. I think it's, if you're releasing an album for $10, I think PayPal takes $1 and Bandcamp takes a 80 cents or $1 or something. So if you're buying it on any other day and it's set to a certain amount, or pay what you want, maybe add an extra 80 cents. Maybe pay that 80 cents so that I end up getting the same royalties as I would on a Bandcamp Friday. Just an option that's out there.
No, that's a great, and it's one thing that I learned from you. I think when I was on your podcast and we did Critters, I saw in the description you put the links, and I was like, why was I not putting the links to, because everybody that comes on the show has something. They've got a blog, they've got a movie coming out, an album coming out, a book that they've written, and it's like, yes, it's great to plug it while people are listening. But I when I saw that you had the link, I think you had the link to my site or something, and I was like, why am I not putting the links to what people are doing in the descriptions? It's like, people are coming on, they should have that. So yeah, so definitely we'll have that in there. And
well, Matt, what it does is it takes a wise old sage in the world of podcasting who is on his last legs, dying on his ass, departing this wisdom to young bucks such as yourself.
Yes. I was thinking about it too, because I was thinking about how, some of the first like movie podcasts I listened to. And the first one was Moe's, Drunk on VHS. And I don't remember how I found it. I want to say that it had to be back when Ty was Bosch. I think he somehow.
Bosch was on there, yeah.
Yeah, I think I may have been connected that way. And then I listened to No Budget Nightmares with him and Doug Tilley. And there was an episode that I think you were on where I think they were doing Doug's movie.
Yes.
Right.
I was for the longest time in No Budget Nightmares. Who they always said we're never having guests.
Right.
I was the only guest for the longest time. And then like later on they started having guests and I was like, you've destroyed the beauty of me being the only guest. But yes, we watched I don't know if it was a student film or a post-student film, but
Doug's movie.
It was Doug's movie.
Yeah,
but I don't know if he made it during university or just post-university.
Yeah, he felt like it would disrupt the integrity of the show if he was discussing his movie. So, but what it did was it was like, John Cross has a
there's another gobshite out there.
That's how I found it. That's how I found your podcast. And so and I'm thinking that must have been like maybe 10 years ago. It probably wasn't long after the podcast. Yeah, I can't remember. And then I think we met when Mo had me on Drunk on VHS, and we did 2 hours of discussing hobo butt flutes and whatever else that we discussed when we were supposed to.
Yeah, I was on the first podcast. I don't know if it was the first podcast I was ever on, actually. I think I was on Profondo Cinema before Mo's show. But the first show I ever did with Mo was the food-themed sex romp episode with Bosch that I believe was like their Halloween episode, even though none of them were Halloween-themed. It was Hamburger the movie, lemon popsicle, hot dog, something else. And I did that episode with Bosch. And the first time I talked to Bosch, first time I talked to Mo. And it was maybe only the second or third part. I forget if I was on Profondo Cinema. I forget if that was the first episode I ever guested on, long before I did my own show. And that episode, I believe, is available on the Drunk on VHS archives, which live on aftermoviediner.com and subsequently live on iTunes and Stitcher and Spreaker and all that good stuff, because Spreaker very kindly granted me radio station status, so I can add as many different podcasts as I want. And Spreaker's really good at disseminating the shows out. So if you go to Podchaser and look at my show, or Podlink or one of those aggregators, you'll see that my show and Drunk on VHS archives and Dr. Action and all the shows that I've been involved in are available on like 70 different platforms. So there's no escaping me. Is what I'm trying to say, even though about 8 billion people manage to escape me every week and not interact with what I do. But there's a core group of about 2.5 that really, not 2.5 billion, 2.5 people. I'm big in the amputee community, Matt, is what I'm trying to say.
Right, that's for that. Yeah, I think, what was it? It wasn't the most recent one. The one I think it was when you did Gotcha, the movie. Is it Gotcha? Is that the one? Yeah.
Yeah, with Scott Toomey.
Right. Who's Michael Knight is his sort of his alter ego on Twitch. Yes. And I was like, oh well. So the problem, of course, for me, because I can't listen on Friday nights when he does his Twitch show. So a lot of times I'll play it like on Saturdays if I'm cooking or something like that. The thing is, if he ever plays any songs that have copyrighted material, they go silent when you do the replay.
Oh, really?
yeah, it just cuts the sound out, and I'm like, is something wrong with the podcast? And it's like, oh no, it's playing the song. I guess when he plays it live, right?
Right.
If you're listening live, you hear everything, but it's a unique thing. I don't know how Twitch does that, but they.
That's a real shame. But I have a claim to fame there. He has played a lot of people on that show, both independent and nationally popular, as well as my friend Sonat Chiba, who's Australian movie buff who does some really great synthwave stuff that he's played on there. He has played Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures exactly once. So once he started doing Retrofuturism, I'm like, great, I've got to get on that show because I just whore myself out, Matt, whatever it is. If it's a music show, I'll figure out music. If it's a movie show, movie show. If it's an amputee show, I'll cut off an arm. Like whatever needs to or I'll fake it. I'll just shove it up inside my t-shirt sleeve and tell some long-winded story about how I lost it in Nam. Whatever it is. I'll do whatever it takes. And the funny thing is I was doing my run of Bandcamp Friday releases, and one of them, which started so long ago now, it feels like years ago now. 2020 feels like a decade ago.
It does, doesn't it? It does.
But when in 2020 I had like 4 or 5 tracks, and the 6th track I was just like, well, how difficult can this be? It's just synthesizers. So I did like a synthwave track on that album. I forget which one album it was. I can look it up if anyone cares. I don't think so, but that anyone cares. But I put that track on the last album. I was like, oh, Scott's going to love this. And I sent it to him, and Scott was like, oh, yeah, that was fun. Never heard anything back. So I was like, okay. Then in 2021, when I was doing even more of the Bandcamp Friday stuff, I thought, well, screw it. The only way I'm going to do it is if I do a really experimental album that has some sort of rock, folk, singer-songwriter stuff on it, but also has like samples and drums and synth and weird beats and whatever. And that was the Splang album.
Oh, right. Yes.
Which was a combination of 10 Splangs, even though they were like Splang number 48 and Splang number 3 and Splang, like they didn't, none of it made any sense. But it was like when Jean-Michel Jarre, who's kind of the French godfather of synthwave, would release like Oxygen Part 2, and the tracks were just called like Oxygen 7.8, and you're like, I don't know what you're going on about. Right. But I did my version of a Jean-Michel Jarre album called Splang, and I think it was Splang number 61 finally won Scott over, and he played it during the Swill and Chill section of his Retrofuturism 101 Twitch Wave DJ set on Friday nights, and everyone loved it. Everyone thought it sounded like Sonic the Hedgehog, the Marble Zone, or whatever the second is. It the Marble Zone's like the second one or the third one, I think.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it's funny. I have Sonic the Hedgehog on my phone, but I can't play it. Like I don't. Apparently, you can get a controller that attaches on the sides of your phone if you actually want. So
Right.
I didn't realize that the game was free. I think I paid like $2 to get the ads out, but but then I got to pay an extra $30 to get a controller for the sides of my phone to actually play it. So
or you could just get a Master System on eBay for like $20.
Right.
Or do what I did. I have the Xbox, and they released a Genesis disc which has like 40 games on it. It has all of the Sonics on there, and that disc was like $14.99. Wow. So it was like $15, and I got like 40 games, and it's all the games I used to play as a kid, which is great. I think there's like, I think they have like 3 of the 4 Sonics that they released for download on an iPhone. Nice. But I got the first one, and I was like, well, I can't play this. It seems great, but it's like I can't, because it's just like I'm essentially using on my phone, like I don't know, it's like touching to, I guess the buttons and everything like that. They kind of just sort of appear as you touch the screen. Right.
Yeah, it does.
Well, I forget what it was, but like around about the time Game Boy was doing roaring business, Sega came out with, and I forget what they called it, but a handheld
Oh, right. Yes.
console, that the innovative thing with it was that it was in color.
Right.
Like it was,
Game
and it
Gear,
was
I think, right?
maybe Game Gear. That sounds, but it was about the size of two of the Max Pro iPhones, like side by side, with a like it had a tiny little screen,
right.
but like a huge panels for your controllers either side. So I guess what they're trying to do is to try and turn your iPhone into one of those things by just kind of Lego system kind of plugging stuff into the various parts of your iPhone that still have sockets. Because like iPhone's just like, we're going to have one socket. Right. That's it. And it fucked everyone up because you can't listen to your thing while charging it now. And it's the whole.
I just covered that because I have the sort of I have the SE version, but like the newest version, because I had an i6 that I broke the screen on, I don't know, 6-7 months ago. So I got this phone, and it's the first one that I had that didn't have the headphone jack. And I was, in a situation where I was waiting. I had a delay. I was flying up to New England and had a 2-hour delay, and I was like, well, I want to charge my phone, but I want to listen to some podcasts, and I realized I can't do both. I only do one.
So the only way to do it that I found it, and what it means is that all the people that sell wireless charging stations, or like hands-free wire charging or whatever. Like I have the little flat panel ones you can leave your phone lying on, or I have the one by the side of my bed that you kind of stick your phone in and it whatever. Either that or the seller of Bluetooth headphones. You either have to go Bluetooth with the charging or Bluetooth with the headphones. But either way, Apple has made a fortune for lots of other businesses other than theirs. Right. You know what I mean? And and I'll never understand it because like their AirPods are something, aren't they like $300 or something for like the AirPods? Right. But what's even more laughable is when you get a new iPhone for thousands of dollars, the headphones they give you with the iPhone are still the old shitty ones they used to give, iPhone 5 or whatever. Like they were the same headphones that they're still trying to get rid of. And I'm like, but you got rid of the jack. So like, no, give me AirPods with my new phone, you bastards. Because you forced us into this corner. And then it's the same with everyone being like, oh, we use USB-C now. I'm like, great. So now I have to spend a bunch of money on USB-C fucking adapters, which,
Yeah, it's an amazing thing because it's like the way like the whole technology thing.
Hello, welcome to Two Old Men Bitch About Technology, a new podcast. No, I'm kidding.
It is though. It's like one of those. Like I've got a flight coming to San Francisco next month. Almost exactly a month from now. Going, and it's the first time I've been on a flight of more than an hour. In I think 2018 I flew out to Denver. So it's been the first time in a long time that I've been on an airplane for a long period of time, and I'm like trying to figure out like what am I going to do to because like I'll bring a book with me, but like I just don't know that I have the capacity at this point in my life to read 5 hours uninterrupted at any point. So yeah, I mean it's a direct flight to Oakland, so I've never flown to the Oakland airport before, so it's also going to be.
So is it one of those flights where they're like, we don't provide screens in the chairs, but if you have a laptop and want to spend $75, you can download our entertainment package, and you're like, so the shit you used to give us for free, I have to now.
Right. It's Spirit Airlines, which I've never flown before. My understanding is that they're not great. So my hunch is that I can't expect anything out of this. Like I can't expect to be fed for 5 hours. I'm not going to expect to get Wi-Fi for 5 hours. I've got to go into this knowing that I've got to find a way to entertain myself as if,
And do you have an iPad or a laptop?
And I've got a laptop. So I've got my work laptop, and then I've got my iPhone. So
my advice to you would be, especially if you don't want to, like if you don't have a lot of hard drive, I don't know how much hard drive space you have, but the best way to get entertainment onto a laptop, so go to YouTube, find all the B-movie action stuff or horror, whatever that you want, and then go to like a Keep Vid or a YouTube downloader of some kind. And you can normally download the videos at like 480 resolution. That for a laptop and on a flight is absolutely fine. And I would just download I should not be telling people that you can download from YouTube because it's illegal, but you can download from YouTube. Download from YouTube, people. It's the way of the future. And it no longer, like pirating no longer, they used to claim like pirating, if you buy pirate movies, you're killing people in India. And you're like, I'm not killing anybody.
Right.
I liked the idea that the FBI and the CIA were trying to make out like pirating movies was a really insidious, dangerous thing.
Right.
Like gun runners and sex traffickers had a sideline in pirating films. Like, no, they didn't. People who were pirating films were just like people in Indonesia selling knockoff DVDs on a side street with a, faintly printed off cover. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't some big conspiracy or some big racket.
Like a gateway thing, right?
Right. Yeah. And I don't see Hollywood losing any money. You know what I mean? Like Hollywood's not, if Hollywood was like, well, shit, we can't make Spider-Man 8 because too many people pirated Spider-Man 7 and the studio has gone under, then sure, I'll you know what I mean? Right. Anyway, Matt, I'm telling you, you go to YouTube, you find movies from 1988 that were only ever available on VHS that some enterprising Xennial like ourselves or Gen Xer like ourselves has uploaded to the YouTubes in one of the back alleyways there. Download a whole ton of those, and that'll get you through the 5 hours easy. That's my recommendation to you.
Yeah, though that might be the way to go. I could kind of, sort of, get some movies in the can. And I can't imagine anything that would be better than me sitting there with my laptop and who knows who is sitting next to me, and they see, like whatever movie it is that I'm watching, I'm trying to think of some good ones that, Cynthia Rothrock films would be great, but I'm thinking of like, some of the best of the worst direct-to-video stuff, and just trying to make sense of whatever it is that Lou Ferrigno action or something like really kind of lower down on the barrel, some nice
either that or something with just something that every 8 minutes has a really gratuitous and nonsensical either sex scene or violence scene. So you could be sat on a plane probably next to somebody who's either never watched the movie or maybe even a child, and you could just influence them by just sitting there and nonchalant, like you don't even react. You're not even getting excited by the sex or excited by the violence. You're just sat there very deadpan watching it while some of the most horrific and erotic images paper your laptop, and the child who's sitting next to you, or maybe a Mormon. Maybe you get sat next to a Mormon, or even better, someone from who are the Amish? Do they fly? I know they don't like electricity, but do they fly?
They might. You never know. Like you never know how. One of the things I think about religious rules is the exceptions that people make to the religious rules.
Yes.
And I feel like there very well could be a caveat that allows for the Amish to fly,
right?
Or a sect of flying Amish, right? Maybe there's like a breakaway sect of flying Amish.
For example, they're allowed to fly, but only if they bring on an emotional support goat with them, and they're allowed to churn butter in the while that I don't know, like something like that.
Now, can you imagine the hilarity of the emotional support goat is like chewing on my laptop cord and gets electrocuted, and then we've got to land the plane like suddenly in like Des Moines or something, an emergency landing because I was watching.
And that's against the rules of the Flying Amish. They're not allowed to land in Des Moines, so it causes this whole religious First Amendment thing. He refuses to get off the plane. They have to send in the bomb squad or something. I don't know, but it could cause a whole thing. And I think that's exactly what you should be doing. What I once saw a great documentary, one of my favorite things, and I agree with you. There is no one better. And again, let's just move into the insulting religious material. Let's just really torpedo this podcast. But there's no one better. I speak as a chosen child of the Lord myself. There's no one funnier in getting around their archaic desert rules than the Jewish. They have whole industries. Whether it's wigs for the women to get away from the fact that the women are not meant to show their hair. They're like, ha, we've covered it with wigs. We're like, oh my goodness. I mean, what a workaround. Who'd have thunk it? I don't know. Maybe just get rid of that idea. Maybe just go, God's all right. It's 2022. God's all right with with women's hair now. It's not like, oh, cover up your hair, mother. You're getting me all excited. But the other thing is there was this great documentary. They're not allowed to use electricity like during the Sabbath, right? From Friday into Saturday. And that's quaint. That's fine. That's wonderful. It's, it is what it is. Tradition's important to those people. And listen, I respect it. I'm not attacking them. But there is a whole cottage industry within the Jewish faith for workarounds. So, for example, they have a telephone that calls every number on the planet all the time, but then you put certain pegs in, it stops on the number you want, right? So you're not doing anything, and the person at the phone company is not doing anything, and the electricity is constantly flowing anyway, so it's not. But essentially, it's a phone that instead of you tapping in a number, right, and the phone company or whatever having to connect, no. It calls all the numbers all at once, and it's a workaround. And I'm like, so wait a minute, God's okay? Like God's not looking at you sneaking stuff through the back door? Like, isn't he omnipresent? Isn't he meant to? Like, I don't. If there's workarounds, how good was the rule in the first place? Like, it's baffling to me. But I'm also constantly impressed because it's a source of innovation, and I'm sure somewhere one of those inventions that is, completely and utterly useless to most of us most of the time. I bet some of those inventions for like times when our electricity goes out. I bet there are some of those inventions that, like, I bet the wind up lamp or whatever was probably one of those inventions. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there are inventions that we use during blackouts and stuff that probably come from those Jewish inventors. So hilarious, but also wonderful because they've given the world. I'm assuming the wind-up lamp, but I have no. It's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, yeah. So I don't.
I remember when I was living in Portland, Maine, my roommate had a friend who he was an interesting character anyway, and he was dating this woman who was Orthodox Jewish, and I guess so she followed a lot of those rules. So he decided, well, I'm going to follow these rules too. It was almost like a
sounds like fun.
To him.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's
But the thing was the ones that he liked were the ones like he wasn't supposed to touch money on the Sabbath.
Right.
So they'd all go out to drinks, and he'd be like, well, you got to pay for me because I can't touch money.
That's
and they'd
genius.
Right there, like,
genius.
They were like, no, you don't order drinks if you can't touch money. Or he would stand there at the door because I guess you couldn't open a door. That was one of them. You can't open the door on the Sabbath. So he would just stand there and be like, almost like the Fonz, like snapping his fingers, like, who's going to open this door for me? Yeah.
So it sounds like your friend was a bit of a twat.
Well, it was my roommate. It was interesting. It was my roommate's friend. Sorry. So I fortunately had very little interaction with him. But I remember one time
sounds
I came home from work. Yeah, I came from work one time and he made a pizza, and he was like all excited to show me that he'd made this pizza. And it was one of those pizzas. I don't know if you've ever if you've ever tried to make your own pizza one time and just didn't flatten the dough out enough, and when you bit into it, you realize, I mean, I don't know if it's something that happened to me when I was very young, when we, had like a pizza making activity or something at school, and I bit into this big thing of like wet dough in the middle of a pizza, and I was like, yeah, no, it was great. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, did you like it? Yes, I did, and so it was like this kind of character, I guess, the kind of person who makes undercooked pizza that a child would make in elementary school when he's in his late 20s.
And find ways for ancient Jewish traditions to get him out of paying for any drinks or opening doors for anyone.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, scumbags is what we call them.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a whole wonderful world of rules and traditions. And I'm here to say, Matt, that whether you fly in the face of rules and traditions, or whether you form your own, or whether you abide by, 2,000-year-old desert ramblings, either one is beautiful and wonderful. And the world is messy, complicated, confused, and at the moment, What's great is I've always known the world was messy, confused, and whatever. So I'm just like waiting for everyone else to catch up. And at the moment, all the people who have spent their entire lives thinking the world is this shiny, beautiful, excellent place that's going to give them, benevolence and love and everything they want, and their dreams are going to come true, and they believe the posters, and they, listen to self-help gurus or whatever. They were big fans of Oprah, whatever nonsense they dialed, whatever, false god they prayed to. It's now all coming crashing down. And it's wonderful. It's like we're we're bumming the entirety of the universe out. It's like the end of Brain Candy. For anyone who's seen Brain Candy, at the very end of Brain Candy, they come up with this antidepressive drug. It turns out it makes us all zombies. So they then come up with an antidote that essentially depresses us all again. That's what's happening right now, and that's wonderful. The world needs to catch up with me. I've been grumpy, depressed, and realistic for decades now. Join me on my, well, don't join me because I hate people, but join me at a distance in relishing the end of humanity's backslapping nonsense. And let's get down to some real business that's what I say, man. And so whatever you decide to follow, it's okay, because at the end of the day, like, we're all dying. So
exactly. Well, I think the one thing about the modern world that does work, it does function okay, is the fact that we just have like so many movies available on all these streaming sites. But yet the streaming sites themselves, I think, realize how good it is, and so they can't. It can't just be like you get nice things. It's like you go to watch a movie that you've been wanting to watch for 2 months and realize it was taken down.
Well, I would argue that the streaming services are not why modern life is glorious. I would say that because the streaming services is anything. I mean, look at the fiasco with HBO Max and various other things that are happening right now. Yeah. Most of the streaming services are actually awful, especially for movies, But what we have, and what I've been writing about a lot lately, because weirdly, although I haven't been doing podcasts, I've been doing a lot of written reviews, is we have the explosion of the boutique Blu-ray distributor. Now, that's slightly more expensive because you're asking people to spend anywhere from $15 to $30 on a single movie, as opposed to streaming where it's like $5 for like, maybe a couple of hundred movies. Yeah. But we are getting movies, Righting Wrongs, for example, the Cynthia Rothrock film, to keep it on point, Matt, to keep it really subject relevant. Yeah. Righting Wrongs, which had been a sort of a missing title for decades. I mean, it had a brief Hong Kong Blu-ray release that no one kind of really got hold of, and it went out of print. It had a DVD, I think Dragon's Dynasty or whatever, which I think was I hate to say it, but wasn't that a Dimension or Weinstein Company like distribution? Dragon's Dynasty, I think it was their like martial arts releasing arm, I think.
It could be.
Or Miramax, maybe back when it was Miramax, I don't know. Yeah. But Dragon's Dynasty put it out on DVD as Above the Law. But it hadn't been out in a long time, and it's certainly never been out in an updated format or cleaned up or with all the different versions and whatever. And we just got the amazing Vinegar Syndrome release a month or so ago, and we're getting 88 films in UK and Europe are putting it out. I don't know whether there's any added features or different whatever, but I've got to imagine it's the same transfer. Yeah. But yeah, so we're getting stuff like that. And yes, it's more expensive than streaming, but to be perfectly honest, the fact, like one of the last shows I was on, we talked about Action USA. The fact that you had a movie like that had really only ever come out on VHS and maybe had been traded around and like digital versions that someone had digitized a VHS. And like when I first saw it, I think Bosch got me or Ty got me the digital version or whatever. To have a movie like that out on not one Blu-ray, but two Blu-rays, like that's fantastic. You know what I mean? And so I would say that if modern life is great at all, it's because we are living in a similar era to the early VHS era when distribution companies were popping up everywhere and trying to put out as much stuff as they could. That's what's happening on Blu-ray. What we're getting on streaming is that everything's becoming a cable company. So everyone's producing their own content. Which is not what any of us wanted. Like no one was clamoring for like Netflix to do its own thing. We just wanted it to be a repository of, 4 or 5 studios back catalog movies. Just keep dumping movies on there and we'll keep watching it. But, and maybe not every single movie that's come out on every single streaming service has been a winner, but there have been some. I think that the 2 streaming channels that I think are doing great stuff at the moment is, funnily enough, Amazon Prime, which is also really good at back catalog stuff. Amazon Prime is allowing a lot of movies that would normally have gone into theaters, but now will not go up against big blockbusters like. And I suppose Netflix is doing this as well with sort of Scorsese stuff and things. But like Clooney's last one was an Amazon movie. Scorsese's last couple have been Netflix movies. I think Wes Anderson is working with either Amazon or Netflix coming up on his next one. So we're getting some filmmakers being allowed to, obviously Fincher did Manhunter and stuff. So we're getting some interesting content from directors that we wish were doing bigger movies, theatrical movies. But then also Shudder is giving a great place for a ton of independent horror films. So a bunch of independent horror films that have come out in the last 10 years have come out as quote unquote Shudder exclusives, when really they were just movies that Shudder bought up at festivals and things. They weren't movies that Shudder funded to begin with. They bought it up. So yeah, I think Shudder is doing some great original content as well as giving us some Batcat stuff. But again, not a lot of Batcat stuff. There's more movies in my horror collection of Blu-rays, DVDs, and VHS than there are streaming on Shudder. We don't yet have the action channel. I mean, Tubi's the closest we have, but it has commercials. Tubi needs to bite the bullet and just do a $5 version that doesn't have commercials, because then I would only subscribe to Tubi. It's all I would do. I just can't watch commercials. I can't watch commercials. So commercials come on and I just want to beat my face with a palette knife, and I hate it. There's something about the voices on commercials, the people on commercials, the music on if anything, if I'm gonna, if there's gonna be a suicide note attached to the end of my life, it's gonna be because they did away with all non-commercial streaming, and all streaming had multiple commercials, and I just, that's probably what it would be.
Yeah, you see, the Tubi one, I don't find the Tubi commercials as obtrusive as, like, say, like Pluto, but I get exactly what you're saying. I feel like I remember watching something with Noam Chomsky, who I don't know. Am I correct that he's been canceled? I feel like he said some bad things about the war in Ukraine or something. I think he's been canceled. So I don't. Did
someone cancel Noam Chomsky? I'm glad they're still canceling relevant people who are up to the minute, relevant people like Noam Chomsky. Yeah,
exactly. But he made a comment about commercials. He's like, if commercials were not meant to be purposely misleading, what a commercial would be is like, for example, it was a car commercial. A car commercial would have a car in the middle of a showroom that with a camera, walking around it, and then the specs of the car listed out next to the car. It wouldn't be the car jumping off a building or jumping through sand dunes or families having wacky adventures and whatever.
Certainly wouldn't be families having wacky adventures. No, if we've learned anything, nothing wacky happens when you put a family in a car.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is what a commercial would be, and I feel like that would be like the best for our sensibilities. I would love it if McDonald's, for example, just like instead of calling their chicken sandwich a crispy chicken sandwich, they were like, this is a fried chicken sandwich that has enough sodium for 2 days worth of sodium in a regular in your diet.
Right.
Has enough calories for at least a half a day, if not a day's worth of calories. And yes, it's probably going to taste pretty good, but that's if the workers that we have working that day, if we didn't put somebody on an open shift after a closed shift, so they're so tired, they can't tell the difference between the stale buns and the real buns, and they don't really give a shit anyways, so they're just going to give you your chicken sandwich with stale buns, and they may not have cooked the chicken properly either, because again, we put them on an open shift after a closed shift, and they only had 4 hours of sleep, so they won't know how long they've cooked it, but that's exactly what you're probably going to get when you get into line at the
and you'll be eating it because you will have exhausted all other options, or you're really lazy, or you're really hungover, or you live above a McDonald's. Like one of those reasons, or you're on the highway and you're driving 8 hours and the only fucking thing is a McDonald's or, a Subway or one of those pizza places where the pizza's just been under a hot lamp for 3 weeks. And all of it is covered in rat feces because you're basically at this kind of like, strip mall in the middle of fucking nowhere. And the only people who like live and work within 100-mile radius are the people who live and work in these stores and the rats that shit on everything.
Exactly.
And you accept that. And look, I would be absolutely fine with it. Also, but it's not just. It's the music, the graphics, and the voiceovers they use.
Right.
If it was just some dude who came on And I don't mean, because they also do this. They also trick us. They have like the irony thing where a guy comes and goes, "Hey, I'm just some dude, and I'm just talking to you, dude to dude." And I'm like, no, just a genuinely honest person just walks out of a thing, bites a McDonald's crispy chicken, goes, "You know what? For $8, it's not bad," and then walks out. Like, I'd be like, okay.
Exactly. Or just like, hey, I was walking by this place. The fries smelled really good because the McDonald's franchises are told to pump the smell of their fries so strong that they can smell them for 2 miles away.
Yeah.
I felt like I wanted some fries. By the time I got in line, I was like, okay, I'm going to get these few things. But of course, I also realized that day only 2 people showed up to work. So now I'm stuck in line waiting for my food. I've already paid for it. Oh, wait, they skipped my food. I've got to go up and ask this one person who doesn't have time to talk to anybody and say, hey, did you get my fries? Oh, okay, you got to put them. Okay, and you actually got to throw another batch in the fryer, so it could be another 20 minutes.
Oh, you're the dude who just ordered fries. We thought that was a mistake, and we just we threw that order away.
Yeah, it would, I think, what was it, the second Super Size Me, which again I think the guy who did the Super Size Me was again canceled. So Morgan
Spurlock's also been canceled.
I believe he was also canceled, but he was talking about that.
Assume we've been canceled as well, Matt. Just assume
it's very possible.
I heard John make some comments about Jewish inventions.
Right.
Didn't insult anyone by doing it.
I believe we were canceled when we did the Critters episode for making fun of ginger individuals.
I was canceled. Yes, even though both of us have ginger in our beards.
Yes,
and
we were canceled. Yeah,
we are clearly part ginge, both of us.
Yeah,
and yet we were canceled.
No, I think that in terms of I'm now assuming if I can use my terminology properly here from the Twitterati in terms of in terms of intersectionality, saying that you have red in your beard does not make you a ginger. Nor does it mean that you go through what gingers go through on a daily. So you can't know what it's like to be a ginger and say that you are somehow akin to a ginger and thus able to make fun of a ginger just because you have ginger in your beard. Hence, you've been canceled. So that's
Hashtag white people. No, just had all white people.
Right.
Just hashtag. And but I also have to say this. As much as we make fun of it, and we're just making fun of it. Yeah. The people who actually go on about cancel culture, like, for example, John Cleese has become, of late, someone who just goes on about cancel culture. They're also terrible people. They're also people I cannot stand. Exactly, we're not going on about, we're just making jokes about, like, people being canceled because it happens to be in the zeitgeist right now. But, like, in general, people who try and cancel people, and then people who just go, well, I can't say anything anymore because of cancel culture. You can say whatever you want. You just can't be an asshole anymore. No, but I want to be able to say the N-word on everything that I do and just be allowed to say it. That's all. When you say you're not allowed to say anything, all we hear in our heads is people saying the N-word. That's all they want to say, and they're not allowed to. Well, we used to be able to say it in the 1950s. I'm like, well, yeah, you used to be able to, people used to be able to do lots of things in the 1950s that they're not allowed to do now. So let's move on. So that's all we hear when people are talking about, like, well, I can't even go on a college campus anymore without being canceled. I'm like, John, you're 80, whatever it is. Lie down and snuggle with your cats. Nobody gives a fuck what you've got to say. I mean, what's hilarious, there was a friend of mine posted about John Cleese recently, because John Cleese, again, is just kind of going on a bunch of British talk shows and being an asshole, just for the sake, just to tarnish the legacy of one of the, he's only one of the funniest people to have ever existed. Let me just dump all over that legacy, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like when Terry Gilliam came out and was like, another thing I don't understand about trans people. You're like, Terry, nobody, like, nothing needed to be said. No one was asking you. No one was beating Terry Gilliam's door down and going, what do you think about the Me Too movement? Nobody asked. In fact, everyone had forgotten Terry Gilliam was even still alive. So, except us who love his movies. But it's just funny how people just go and say shit that's nothing to do with them about anything. That's what I find hilarious. So Cleese going on about cancel culture. I'm like, really, Cleese? How many 19-year-olds are asking John Cleese to come to their college campus and talk about? Seriously, like I think just Cambridge, like just his alma mater is probably the only people who are asking Cleese back. You're not getting someone at, like, I don't know, Luton University or Birmingham University or whatever, some university in England, full of 18-year-olds being like, who should we have as our speaker? Should we have some current, up to the minute, cutting edge sexy celebrity. Oh no, some John Cleese is going to complain about the fact that he can't wear blackface anymore or something. Like, I don't know, like what?
Yeah, well, it's going to be like, how blue is John Cleese going to work doing a commencement speech at Cambridge? Like, what is he going to say? I always feel the way that I feel about cancel culture is that the way we know cancel culture doesn't exist is that Mel Gibson's still able to make movies.
Right.
The fact that Mel Gibson can make movies tells me that there is no such thing as cancel culture. But I think like the Morgan Spurlock thing, I think he was canceled because I think it was a sexual assault thing. So I think in his case it really wasn't a good thing. I shouldn't be talking like about those kinds of things. Like, I don't know how many people listen to this podcast that might be like, oh, who's out there saying horrible things about Morgan Spurlock? You're going to get sued for libel or slander or whatever. But I think that's what it was. I think it was like I think he was inappropriate with somebody.
Allegedly. We'll just put allegedly before everything. Right. So stop the podcast allegedly before everything we just said.
Exactly.
Even though a lot of it was fact, and then allegedly everything now, and then we're clear. That's fine.
Yeah.
But no, I mean the cancel culture thing, to be honest, is the only problem I have no problem with someone saying, I don't want to watch the celebrities' movies anymore. I don't want to listen to the celebrities' music anymore because of X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, whether it's a legitimate offense like a sexual assault or something terrible like that, or whether it's just because they found a photograph of them from 1985, doing an Al Jolson impression or something. Like, whatever the reason you personally have chosen. My problem is then when people take to Twitter about it. Well, I just, it's funny. I was just editing the podcast about Demonoid that I did with my friend Kirk Howley back from January. And in it, the subject came up about like the Joe Rogan and everyone canceling Spotify because Joe Rogan had inaccurate information about vaccines on his show and Spotify was paying him millions of dollars. So everyone canceled their Spotify accounts, right? Do whatever you want to do in order to protest whatever you think is worthwhile protesting. I have no problem about it. You do not need to take to Twitter. Well, I canceled my Spotify. Well, lardy fucking die. I don't care. You know what I mean? I choose not to eat Chick-fil-A, but I don't go on to, I chose, look at me driving past a Chick-fil-A and not going in. Well, nobody cares, right? So that's the first thing. It's the value signaling that people try and do. People are like, look at me, I'm a good person. Meanwhile, they're ignoring their children and, dumping massive amounts of garbage into landfills and buying iPhones that are assembled by children in China, whatever it is. You know what I mean? But no, Joe Rogan, who isn't a healthcare professional and isn't even a particularly entertaining podcaster, had some incorrect information about vaccines. Not a healthcare show, not a news show, not anything that you should be taking any healthcare advice from. But no, because he has inaccurate information on his show, which is, by the way, his legal right. He can say whatever the fuck he wants under the terms of the First Amendment, unless Spotify says don't say that anymore. If he's got a corporate overlord and Spotify says don't do it anymore, fine. That's also perfectly fine. But people canceling Joe Rogan or canceling Spotify or doing whatever, it's obviously fine. Just don't tell me about it because I don't give a fuck, right? I mean, you cannot exist in 2022 without something that you own being tainted by either child labor, sex trafficking, violence towards women, oppression of minorities, everything. I don't care whatever you buy in a store, because if you go to the real cheap stores, the non-branded, non-corporate stuff, that's put together by, failing ill children in Indonesia political prisoners and whatever. Right. Or if you go to the branded stores and buy all the corporate stuff, then similarly, it's either made in sweatshops or it was made by a bunch of people who are thoroughly underpaid, who don't have healthcare benefit, et cetera, et cetera. There's nothing you can get or buy or consume or whatever that isn't tainted by something, right? So that's the first thing. And there isn't any celebrity, creator, artist, whatever, from the last 150 years, 200 years, 500 years, whatever, that hasn't done something like hasn't drunk too much, hasn't hit someone they shouldn't have hit, hasn't slept with someone they shouldn't have slept with. I'd hate to tell these people what Paul McCartney got up to when he was 15, 16, 17, 18. But no, cutesy, lovely, cheruby Paul McCartney, the world's fucking uncle. Everyone loves him. But he was, he fucked around for like a good 10 years before he met Linda, stuck his wick in about as much as everything he could. So you'll never find anyone who's not tainted, right? But if you choose to cancel someone, go ahead, cancel someone for your own reasons. I don't need to hear about it. That's the first thing. I do not care to hear about it. And secondly, this idea that we can no longer say what we want to say or do what we want to do is completely false. And as long as you're not a dick, as long as you're not really, and there are some people who get. The other thing is also be aware that it's a minority, right? What happens is a bunch of people in the minority get upset about something. Same thing used to happen with banning videos and banning rap music or whatever. The media, who are always looking for a tree to shake and always looking for just something to piss everyone off with, grab hold of this story, put it as large as it possibly can on every single media site everywhere, and shakes the tree till there's no more coconuts in it, and then they go on to the next thing. And that's it. The voices that are amplified right now, and the voices that have been amplified forever, are always the wrong voices. Yeah. So that's the other thing to take into account with cancel culture. So I just kind of I ignore all of it. The only thing that came out recently, and this is to do with podcasting and you and me and whatever, was off the back of that, and I talk about this in my latest episode, but so I'll try not to repeat myself, but off the back of the Joe Rogan Spotify thing or whatever, I'm assuming, when I went to upload some episodes later in the year, March, April, May, Spreaker did suddenly have like a make sure the content of your show fulfills our terms and conditions, doesn't go against our terms and conditions. And I was like, huh. And when you go to the terms and conditions, and I looked at it, it's very fair, and it's coming from a good place, and it's just like treat everyone nicely and try and be kind about people and blah, 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 blah. But again, all of that is open to interpretation. And secondly, unless you weren't in any way making money off my show, and Spreaker is, because they put adverts on my show and they take the bulk of the money from those adverts. If you weren't making money off it, then, by all means have an opinion. But if you're making money off it, then whatever continues to make you money should be fair game. Yeah. Now, if you were paying me, you were my boss, that's a different matter. You can tell me what I meant to say and what I meant to think. So the only place that cancel culture worries me is when the internet, which is something of a Wild West still, thankfully, where you can upload whatever show you want, you can upload whatever music you want, blah, 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 blah. If it slowly begins to become regulated to the point where even little guys like us are getting scrutinized about what we say, I think that would be, I would find that to be problematic, because it's the line between censorship and freedom of speech. And that's what I'm worried. I'm worried about where it escalates to. I'm not worried about where it is right now. There's always been people saying, I don't think that my children should be listening to rude words on rap music or whatever it is. But, and those people need to be shot and put in mass graves somewhere. But, because they don't care about their children. Yeah. They care about people thinking they're good people. They don't care about what their children hear at all, because their children are going to grow up to be drug addicts and rapists and, bankers and all the bad people that exist on the planet. Their children are going to grow up to become those people as well. It doesn't matter what they listened to as a kid, but because they had those types of parents. But they don't care about their parents. They know their children. They care about how good they look. I don't care about how good I look, Matt. You might have noticed.
I'm the same. I'm the same, right? Yeah, because for me, it's like, I, for example, I'm trying to get to a point where maybe I'm a little bit closer to vegetarian, where I'm kind of, if there's a vegetarian option, I'll choose it, just because I'm a person who likes animals, and it does feel kind of contradictory. But, for example, lamb. I think lambs are they're cute. They're adorable animals, and I feel guilty eating them. But today I was at Reading Terminal Market here in Philadelphia. I passed the Greek shop, and I had to get a hero. And I ate it, and I felt guilty after. But that's why you don't see me on Twitter saying anybody who eats lamb is a horrible person. You hate cute, adorable animals. You deserve to die for doing that. The reason why I don't do that is because I know myself. I know I'm a weak human being. I don't
And also part of the guilt and part of the shame, that's why it tastes so good. You know what I mean? The guilt and the shame are part of the the collection, like when you bite into, and I mean, lamb is just lamb and duck, you know what I mean, and veal, like all the bad meats are just like foie gras.
Yeah.
And I hate to sound like, oh, la-di-da, foie gras, like whatever. It's fuck, I get it. It's a puncy, whatever.
Right.
But they feed the geese to bursting, right?
Right.
And they expand their livers or whatever, and then they kill them and they make this amazing pate that melts in your mouth, and it's incredible. And it's incredibly cruel to the goose. And I agree. I like animals, you know, whatever. But you know, part of the guilt and shame in eating foie gras is part of why it tastes so good. However, I'm not there yet. I've not cut out any bad food habits. But as I push into my 40s and I wake up feeling in pain a lot of the time, and I don't start to feel human till about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, because my joints are still unseizing and my gut is still figuring out whether it wants to shit itself or not. I should probably cut out some of the food that I have been known to eat, and I'll get around to it, Matt, probably about a month before I die.
Exactly. But it's the problem.
But no, I take your point. I do take your point. Jokes aside.
I mean, McDonald's is another one. I mean, Popeye's chicken, you know, that's one thing that here in Philadelphia, a lot of the in the city, a lot of the McDonald's closed during the pandemic, but the Popeye's chickens stayed open.
Oh, they kept going. There's no stopping Popeye.
No, they've got millions of chickens on farms that they're just overfeeding and killing and frying them up, and it's just perfect. And
it tastes so good.
Yeah, and so the smell of McDonald's fries has now been replaced with the smell of Popeye's fried chicken.
Right.
And it's like every time you walk by, it's like a good 3-block radius that you can smell this chicken, and it's potent. And you know, I think they recently raised the price of their chicken sandwich, but for a while, I could get a chicken sandwich for like $5.
$5 for a chicken sandwich.
And it completely killed the purpose of any of my walks, because I would be going out for a walk to try to like burn calories, and I would just put those calories right back in with that, you know.
But you shouldn't feel too bad, Matt, is what I'm trying to say. Because, you know, as we've established, everything is tainted. Everything is tainted. No one is a perfect human being. No. Least of all us, and we're not claiming to be. And so, you know, and again, with the world the way it is, and people might be like, that's just a cop-out, John. You have to seize the day and be positive, whatever. Listen, I bought myself a compound. I'm up in the wilds and woods of New England, and everyone else can go fuck off. Like, I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not being defeatist. I'm happy. I've had the greatest year of my life. Like, seriously, and everyone else having a terrible time. I had the greatest year of my life. And do I feel guilty about that? Sure. But also, do I realize that, you know, you've got to find your joy where you can? Yes, 100%. So find your joy where you can, Matt, is the message that I give to people. I'm not all doom and gloom. I'm not all doom and gloom. No, have a Popeye's chicken sandwich if the mood takes you, and kill a baby goat and fuck a lamb, whatever you need to do to get by. Because, you know, they're all just here as for our entertainment. You know what I mean? You could be, you know, waging wars or blowing people up for no good reason. You could be. One of the things I wanted to mention, the things kept talking about celebrity bullshit, because we love to rag on celebrities because they're the worst. I don't know if you've seen recently, but Florence Pugh, the actor Florence Pugh, is in this new movie coming out with Harry. What's his name from? Was he in One Direction? Harry Styles was he in One Direction?
I have no idea who he is. I see him showing up from time to time. I think he wore a dress to a Met Gala or something. And everybody thought it was the greatest thing ever. That's what I know.
People don't remember what Elton John used to wear in the 70s, so they're all like, "Oh my God, he's such a trendsetter." I'm like, or David Bowie or anyone like
Or the guitarist from Smashing Pumpkins in Today video. Right, exactly right. Yeah. Or nobody remembers the 80s when it's like these kids think that they've invented gender fluidity. And it's like, have you ever seen a Human League video from the 80s? What the lead singer looked like in the videos? And he was,
have you ever seen like paintings of Shakespearean and Elizabethan times? Like men literally wore dresses. So anyway, but so she's done a new movie with him, right? And it's directed by Olivia Wilde, and Olivia Wilde used to be married to Jason Sudeikis. And everyone loves Jason Sudeikis because of Ted Lasso, and they believe him to be really Ted Lasso. And they believe Olivia Wilde to be the worst person on the planet because she shacked up with Harry Styles, and now she's going out with him, right? Anyway, she's gone ahead and made a movie in which him and Florence Pugh, who's an upcoming actor who was in Fighting with My Family and Black Widow and various other movies, and she's great, whatever, she's a good actor. There's a lot of sex scenes in this film, right, with the two of them, right? Also, Florence Pugh, has just broken up with Zach Braff. I don't know how she ended up with Zach Braff or what stone he crawled out from under and went, hello, I'm still a thing. I don't know how that happened, but she was dating Zach Braff for a long time, apparently.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know how I know about this whole thing?
Because
it was on Twitter. I know about it? It was on Twitter, but it was on Twitter.
Right.
It was a shared interview. I think she was in Vulva or one of these magazines. Labia, the monthly magazine for people who talk, whatever it was. Or I think it's just called Flaps or something. Anyway, she was in one of these magazines, right, where she was paid to wear, $1 million clothes and have photographs of her breasts taken and whatever. Yeah. And during this interview, which has been widely quoted, quoted. During this interview, she says two things, right? The first thing she goes is, I tried to have relationships in private. I didn't want anyone to know that me and Zach Braff had broken up. We tried to do it quietly, right? But Zach Braff and I have broken up. I don't know if you know this, but Zach Braff and I have broken up, even though I tried to do it quietly, right? The only way I even knew she was dating Zach Braff is that she mentioned it in an interview that they had broken up. It's the only way. I didn't, prior to that, I had no knowledge, interest, whatever. The only way I knew about it is because she said something. Yeah. And then the other quote she's done, which is great, is she goes, all anyone can talk about is the sex scenes in the new movie. The movie where I have lots of sex scenes with Harry Styles. The movie where I have sex scenes with Harry Styles. So Harry Styles is one of the most famous people on the planet, even though you and I don't even know where he comes from or why. He has sex scenes with me. Why is everyone talking about this? There's a lot better things in the movie. And I'm like, everyone's talking about it because you won't stop mentioning about how everyone keeps talking about it. And the media won't stop promoting the movie based on the sex scenes. Unless they are so relevant to the plot, right? Unless they drive the action, unless the action is like, I have to keep having sex with Florence Pugh or like it's a Speed type scenario. And if she stops orgasming for even 5 minutes, she dies. So Harry starts, like, unless that's the plot of the movie, right? Maybe don't put all the sex scenes in it.
Right.
And if you do put all the sex scenes in it, don't be surprised when the marketing campaign revs up and goes, who wants to see Harry Styles' penis? Right. Or Florence Pugh's breasts? Like, it's this idea of, don't talk to me. I shun media attention while giving a long-ranging, in-depth interview in which you talk about everything you don't want the media to know about. And like, do you know what you could have done? You could have A, not given the interview, and B, shut the fuck up. That could have been, and then we would have been none the wiser.
This would be like Donna Spear in like 1992 saying, yeah, I did this Andy Sedaris movie. Yes, I took my top off. Why is everybody talking about me doing a topless hot tub scene? Did you know this movie has hotless tub scene? I can't.
Hotless tub. Topless hot tub scene. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, it's amazing. Like, so the Zach Braff thing is funny because so my wife Jen has been introducing me to Scrubs, so I've been watching Scrubs. Okay. I'd never really seen it before. The one thing I noticed about the show is that anytime a popular actress from the time guest stars on the show, it's only a matter of how long into that episode that Zach Braff's character starts having sex with her. Right. Like, oh, here's Tara Reid. Okay, we're going to have sex. Heather Graham. Oh, they extended that a few episodes before he had sex with her, And it's like every single one of them he has sex with. Oh, Turk's wife, Carla. Eventually they've got to kiss because Zach Braff can't have an actress on the show that he doesn't hook up with at some point. And so when she told me that he was dating someone who was like 21 years his junior, I wasn't surprised. I imagine he's going to be I feel like he has the potential to be a less creepy, more charming James Woods type as he gets older. That's my thinking process. photographs with him. But then, like, she told me he was dating. Then I'm on Twitter.
Cut to 2040, and Zach Braff is like, Donald Trump was the real overlord of everything.
Right.
I don't know what, suddenly becomes like a horrible right-wing militant. Yeah.
Right, exactly, yeah. But so when I saw on Twitter that they had split up, and I didn't know it was this woman, Florence Pugh, until you met, but I just remember seeing, like, it was like this thing about them breaking up, and the picture of him, he looked older in the picture than, I know he's only like a few years older, but he seemed like he was,
78 or 9.
He looked like he was James Spader's age or something like that. Like, he's, right, like he could be co-starring with James Spader. But but it's like this whole thing of like the show's funny. I enjoy the show.
I hope they never cancel James Spader. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they looked into his past even for 2 minutes, they would cancel everything because he has wiped his filthy, sleaze-ridden pubis on everything that moved between 1982 and 1998. But I don't mind that. That's the appeal of James Spader.
Yes.
Just as long as he didn't do it against anyone's will.
Yeah.
But is there any such thing in the world as against anyone's will where James Spader is concerned? Because I would let him. Like, honestly. Yeah. Even now with his big rotund face and shaved head and trilby hats and little scarves and drinking coffee out of tiny cups and swanning about, even that James Spader I'm down for. But,
yes. For me, I think I remember when I first saw Pretty in Pink, and he's in that movie, and I know I was supposed to not like him.
Maximum sleaze in that movie.
I'm watching this and I'm told that I'm supposed to like, which I don't know why I'm supposed to like John Cryer's character, because he was a stalker and everything that he does. Now they have PSAs telling kids that if your boyfriend is doing what John Cryer did in Pretty in Pink, that's not healthy, and you probably need to get out of that and tell somebody that this person's not.
100%, especially as Ducky was quite clearly homosexual.
Right, exactly.
And even there was and everyone's like, oh, judging, but and I'm not judging anybody. There was literally an ending to the movie where he was going to be gay. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but Spader's character was just like with the hair and the suits and the sleaziness.
Yeah, he looks like a 30-year-old Wall Street type in the middle of high school.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. It's just incredible.
Yeah, and I think that was how I think that movie, and I think I saw that movie and because I saw Pretty in Pink later on. Of course, it wasn't like right when it came out. I was a bit older.
But isn't Pretty in Pink? The Pretty in Pink is the one with Andrew McCarthy as the love interest, like Blaine, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So what is mad about Pretty in Pink? What is absolutely insane about Pretty is James Spader and Andrew McCarthy are basically the same people. They cut from the same cloth. Come from the same backgrounds, same floppy hair, same, rapist banker fathers, same entitled, priggish, idiot. But if you line the two of them up, you'd be on Spader all day, every day. And Andrew McCarthy you'd use when you needed to get to sleep.
Right.
You know what I mean? Could you sit by my bedside and read me a story? Well, and another time when I wasn't very interesting in a movie. Whatever. And I love Andrew McCarthy. Don't get me wrong. Andrew McCarthy's fantastic. But at the same time, he's vanilla and pale and awful as anything. And I'm just saying, cut from the same cloth, same kind of people. The fact that you give McCarthy the time of day and not Spader. Ringwald, especially as Ringwald at the time, Ginge, and James Spader at the time, Strawberry Ginge. Not quite Ginge, but kind of like strawberry blonde kind of, right? He had a little Ginge. Mate within your own sect, Ringwald, is all I'm telling you.
Yeah, I think Andrew McCarthy's most exciting scene in any movie that I've ever seen was when Judd Nelson was hanging him over a ledge in St. Elmo's Fire.
I would say that prior to that scene, it's the scene where he's having sex with Ali Sheedy on top of a coffin, and Ali Sheedy refuses to remove her pearls. That's the most exciting scene. Oh, that and him playing bongos to Aretha Franklin. I mean, who doesn't love that? Who doesn't want to see the whitest man to have ever been on film wearing a trilby hat, dark glasses, and playing bongos to Aretha Franklin? The 80s were really, Matt, just another time.
The 80s were, I think, I think for us as individuals who were born at the end of the 70s, early 80s, where it was like, all we knew was this 80s world. And yes, you get these flashbacks to, you get like, old TV shows and things like that to get a sense of what the world was like before. But to be like in that world as someone who was forming a sense of identity and an understanding of like what this planet is, that it exists, and all of that, to be in and amongst that thing.
Right.
And also it's fascinating to see now like how it's depicted in popular culture. Like it just seems like now it's just all neon and Pizza Hut sunglasses or whatever, and it's like, no, it was this world in the 80s that was
Well, people never talk about how brown the 80s were and how gray the 80s. Everyone thinks that everyone just wore neon pop socks and went into like brightly colored fast food restaurants and danced around and played computer games. There was some, Matt, there was some of that. That's not to be denied. But like mostly, what people forget is decades bleed into each other. So what we call the 80s is really about 84, 85 through to like 92, 93. That's really what we're talking about. The 70s were a big part of the 80s.
Yeah.
Like if you look at any pictures of me from either baby to when I first went to junior school, it's all brown. Everything is brown and orange and beige and gray, like all of it. The clothes were, the whatever, the hairstyle, everything.
Couches were brown.
Couches, everything. Everything was brown, and it all had a rich smell of like tobacco and plastic. Everything smelt of like plastic covered, tobacco drenched brownness.
Yes. And old stale beer from like beer cans of like Wounded Soul, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how it should be, Matt. That's how it should be. But unfortunately it's not. Unfortunately, people like to believe that the 80s were just like, wacky and fun and neon filled, and every day was a holiday, and everyone at school was wonderful and whatever. What I most like about the 80s is that it has given us such a signpost of what not to become in the visage of John Cusack.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, in the 80s and 90s, Cusack, vibrant, young, creative, intelligent, on the edges of society, funky. Everybody wanted to be Lloyd Dobler. Everyone wanted to be Lloyd Dobler. He was the new era of gentleman / punk teen that everyone wanted to be. He was respectful to people. He was intelligent. But he knew the best music. He was into kickboxing. He knew Don the Dragon Wilson personally. Like, who doesn't love John Cusack in the 80s? And in the 90s, he's proselytizing about music and about movies and hanging out with Jack Black and Tim Robbins, doing a whole bunch of great stuff and creative whatever. And then slowly and surely, as he gets older and looks more like my grandmother, and he has more and more face tucks and weird hair implants and refuses to give up the Ramones t-shirt, and just as it goes on, and by the time you get to Must Love Dogs, John Cusack, I'm not even talking about his descent into like B-movie anonymity, political bullshit, which again, political John Cusack, just shoot me now. I mean, just the most yawn-worthy, irritating Instagram presence there's ever been. Oh my God, John, what's this next fucking cause celeb you're taking out? Oh my God, someone hit him with a brick. But the descent from, if anyone has heralded that, you should really move on a little bit and broaden your horizons a little bit, because John Cusack is still and talking about like the Ramones in Serendipity. And I'm like, look, it's over, John. The punks have come and gone. You're part of the mainstream now, dude. You're in a fucking Kate Beckinsale rom-com. Enough already. In Must Love Dogs, he's hanging around making old canoes out of like teak and pine and wearing fucking, Sex Pistols t-shirts. I'm like, you're in a Diane Lane rom-com called Must Love Dogs, dude. It's time to give it up. Like, we've all, like, it was fine, but no, like, no, and there he is polishing his teak canoe and wearing his Ramones t-shirt and whatever. And I'm just like, and then he slipped into B-movie Abyss, which there's a couple of good ones. Like Bagman is perfectly decent and has a great cast and a good thriller kind of 90s things to do in Denver throwback kind of thriller movie. I like that one. Grand Piano was ridiculous, but at least it was sort of knew what it was, ridiculous, whatever, and jokey and whatever. But everything else he's done, like, just let's not. So my cry out to the 80s and 90s children of the world is use John Cusack as a way not to be. But Matt, as I sit here, I fear the Cusackation of myself as a Xennial or as a Gen Xer. I see myself, give up the band T-shirts. I can't give up the band T-shirts, Matt. I'll keep wearing them. Give up I'm surrounded by movies and music and musical instruments and posters and stuff. I just can't give it up. So I myself am being Cusacked as we speak. So it is.
You know what it is with the Cusackification? What you don't want to be is in Juno, right? You don't want to be Jason Bateman,
right,
with a high school chick showing off Sonic Youth's cover of Superstar by the Carpenters. When you get into that Cusack level, that's probably maybe Juno was a commentary on the Cusackification.
That would be wonderful if Cusack had played Bateman's role. That really would have typified it. I really do think, because you're right. This is the reason why me, as a proud Gen Xer / Xennial, whatever you want to call me, I never hung out with hipsters.
Right.
Because hipsters are the 20-somethings who carry around vinyl and talk about vinyl as an affectation.
Yeah.
I don't hang out with it. I don't want to be like, hey, kid, do you want to see a Cynthia Rothrock movie or whatever? Like, exactly. I'm not doing it to be, again, we're not on Twitter being like, hey, look at me. I know who Pam Grier is. Like, I do say that on Twitter, but I'm also not on, I'm joking. Yeah. But, I'm just saying, just because another generation came up behind us who believe they know everything we know, but they don't because they weren't there. And it's funny because it never happened to my father's generation. There weren't like 20-somethings growing up being like, I want to know Glenn Miller. Like that wasn't, you know what I mean? Like people weren't like, hey, have you got the latest Glenn Miller 78? Like that wasn't you know what I mean? Not even 33 or 45. They're going 78s, Matt. They're going way, way back.
Well, it's funny too, because I think the one thing about like our generation and maybe, previous ones is like, I would never tell my parents what things were like in the 60s or 70s. That like I think younger generations are willing to tell people what it was like in the 80s and 90s. And it's like I my great grandfather. I'm not going to be like, yeah, I know what it was like being in the lost generation and wandering around during the Depression trying to find work. It must, I know, and I think that's probably the most fascinating thing. And I guess part of it is it's going to be interesting to see because like history is now like we're now like being able to say that the things that we liked, like the movies we're going to talk about, the Rage and Honor movies, they're essentially history. They're 30 years old at this point. They're as old as in the 80s that movies like I don't know. I can't think of too many movies that came out in the 50s that were I think of movies in the 40s, but I mean you think of like a Citizen Kane that came out in 1940.
Right.
It wasn't as old at that time, and I guess that's kind of that.
Well, that's what I mean. No one was going on. I mean, I don't know. As I grew up in the I think this is the difference as well. Is that the memory now, or the information now is so selective.
Yeah.
Right. So, and again, it's why we're seeing the Stranger Things version of the 80s rather than the real 80s. It's because it's whatever they've been sold as, whatever the second. And it was the same with us. Like if all you ever watched was the Woodstock documentary and the Beatles on top of Abbey Road and, a bunch of stuff that, or Back to the Future, whatever, the bunch of stuff that only happened in London, San Francisco, LA, or New York, you would think the 60s was just an endless stream of, fascinating, exciting, innovative stuff.
Yeah.
But really, with we're only talking about 4 or 5 cities. Like the best example of this is my mom grew up in London during the 60s, and knew everything that was going on, was there when the Beatles played Abbey Road Rooftop, went to the Isle of Wight Festival, she was a card-carrying 60s hippie, part of the scene, Carnaby Street, London, the whole bit, right? My dad, who grew up like an hour out of London in like a quaint little, not Midwest town, but Midlands town, and did a job for like the local bank, driving around in a brown car with a guy named Teddy doing inspections. He was on the bank inspection staff. He didn't know anything about the Beatles or about the Rolling Stones or Jimi Hendrix. Like none, that wasn't in his world. And he was way more people than, you know, were in the hippie movement. So it's like if you weren't on Haight-Ashbury, you know, if you lived in I don't know if you lived in Oregon in the 60s. So if you're in Medford, Oregon, you know, about 2-3 hours north of San Francisco, you know, you're not, and maybe that's a bad example because a lot of hippies moved up to Oregon, but I don't know. You know what I'm saying, though? If you're 2-3 hours out from the epicenter of whatever big, you know, peace and love, drug-fueled gangbang is happening, you might as well be on Mars, because if you're not right in the center of the gangbang with all holes filled, what's the, sorry.
No, but I know exactly what you mean. I mean, one of the fascinating things I see with sort of people who have the nostalgia of growing up in the 80s is, I think one of the areas where people who grew up in the UK and people who grew up in America have in common about the 80s is that you had Reagan in the US, you had Thatcher in England and in the UK, and they were kind of similar politically, and so there leads to, I think, some similarities in sort of like what people experienced that.
To be honest, Matt, it's not just that. It's the fact that the 80s became, although that was obviously, you know, them and Gorbachev and that whole, like that's still iconic, right? Yeah. Sort of the last time we had those real iconic kind of presidencies, but and politicians. But you have a situation where for really the first time since the 50s, and the reason why kind of Back to the Future exploits both the 80s and the 50s, it's the first time since the 50s that American culture pervades England in quite that way. Yeah. In the 60s and 70s, you have an exchange. There's as much English culture coming over here as there is American culture going over there, and not everything is being put on credit card or being run by Wall Street or whatever. By the time you get to 80s, it's the, you know, it's the bank generation, it's the credit card generation, it's everything is now going through, you know, New York replaces London to some extent at the center of the financial world. And, you know, all commercials on British TV start to be for Pepsi and Coke and McDonald's and whatever. It, like, if my memory of the 80s is anything, it's just the Americanization of British things. And I wasn't against that. I've never been against that. I always say this. Without America, you don't have modern movies. You don't have rock and roll music, blues music, jazz music, punk music, whatever. Say what you like about America. The culture of the 20th century and the culture of the 21st century is American. You either make peace with that or you don't. And there's lots of reasons why it's American, and some of it is slavery and some of it's bad and some of it's whatever. But it's American, whether you like it or not. The pervading sense in the 20th and 21st century is American, and it is what it is. And the Brits can try and hold on to some vets. Well, you know, we had the Beatles. You don't have the Beatles without Elvis Presley or without, you know, Fats Domino or whatever. So don't try and pretend, right? So it is what it is. And each culture informed each other, right? So the Beatles started out, as I said, based on Elvis or whatever, and then Dylan came along, and the Beach Boys came along, and the Beatles were like, oh, we hear that, and let's spit it back to you. And then, you know, the Beatles came out with some heavier stuff, and Led Zeppelin started, and yeah, it all sort of informed each other. But come the 80s, all the big movies are American. All the big music artists, or 90% of the big music artists, are mostly American. The American British TV shows start to look American. All that American novels start to get taught in school, like we were taught On the Road and various other stuff. So like that's what, to my way of thinking, like typifies the 80s for me, growing up, and even the 90s, because it, you know, by the time 90s roll around, like Channel 4, which was sort of the fourth channel that came about in the UK in 1986, which started off doing a lot of its own original programming. Channel 4's Friday nights, one of the most popular nights on television in the UK in the 90s, was like Friends, Frasier, you know, it was all the stuff that was coming over from the US. I grew up watching the A-Team and the Hulk and Wonder Woman and all those Dukes of Hazzard, all those shows that were regular shows over here were like Saturday night early tea time shows in the UK. So we would watch A-Team and all those shows all the time, and then after that kind of Baywatch and those other shows that kind of replaced them. So all that stuff, it became, you know, the Americanization of the UK really hit its zenith in the 80s. And it didn't mean that there weren't like British films being made, and there wasn't British TV shows being made, and there isn't something, but it was predominantly America, and that was reflected in the politics, and it was reflected in the banking, and it was reflected in everything, really.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you talk about the music part of it, because for me, a lot of what I remember is either MTV or MTV influenced. And in the early 80s, when MTV first started, it had a racist past. The mindset was, we're only playing white acts because we want to appease college white guy bro culture. A bunch of white guys with mullets and tight jeans and white high top sneakers. And so because there were only so many American acts that had videos at that time, they were just pulling everything from England and all of those acts. And so that's where Duran Duran was played twice an hour. Hungry Like the Wolf would be twice an hour or something. But finally, I think the American, the music companies in America were like, okay, well, listen, you want to play our white acts? Then you got to play Michael Jackson, or you got to play Prince. Right. And then they started playing, which is funny because now MTV had the reputation in the late 80s as being the ones that really brought rap to the mainstream.
Right. And to be honest, Duran Duran, they may be British, but they sound that they're an American sound. You know what I mean? So a lot of those 80s bands, American sound. There wasn't a lot of Clash or Sex Pistols or the Specials or there wasn't a lot of those. They may have been played on MTV, but that's not what they were hanging their hat on, right? So at the end of the 70s, you have glam, and there's certainly some key British glam acts. Obviously, you have T-Rex, Mark Bolan, you have ELO, you have a bunch of like whatever, disco and whatever, but predominantly punk and ska, which is sort of like when you ask a real British guy, like a real fucking egg case about like fucking music in the 80s, it's fucking punk and ska, mate. Yeah. Typified sort of by like bands, like I said, the Specials and Madness and Squeeze and stuff like that, and the Clash and bands like that. And but you take if someone didn't tell you, for example, that Kate Bush was English, you wouldn't know Kate Bush was English. And I don't mean that as a negative. I'm just saying the music informs the music, and the music that got popular in the 80s, the sort of pop music and the pop adjacent, because Kate Bush is pop, but she's also kind of a singer-songwriter thing, doing her own thing. And by the way, I want to use this platform to anyone who's listening. Stop with Running Up the Hill. Just stop it. Just stop it. It's in everything.
I heard it in Dunkin'
Stop
Donuts.
it.
I heard it in Dunkin' Donuts the other day. I've heard it twice in Dunkin' Donuts.
We were at the Yankee game the other day, and they played it at Yankee Stadium. I'm like, stop it.
I know, but I remember that. I never heard that song. I think the one that I heard was the one she did with Peter Gabriel, "Don't Give Up," because that was off So. I think that's what that was. Right. Yeah. But in the 90s, and I don't, if you had a similar movement in England, but in the 90s with the, with Nirvana, Pearl Jam, it was a matter of like who can out alternative who. When you get into high school. And so it was like, oh, you listen to Nirvana, that's too mainstream for me. Oh, Oasis, that's too mainstream. No, I listen to Depeche Mode. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, I like Violator. Oh, no, I don't listen to Violator. That one was too mainstream. I listen to like, music for the masses, or, and Kate Bush was in that realm. I remember working with a cook who was born in the 60s, who was born like in the mid 60s, who was just enamored with Kate Bush. He had like all of her videos and all that stuff. And that was kind of how I was introduced to her. But it was a sense of like, you liked Kate Bush, and Kate Bush was like kind of one of those ones where you were like, yeah, no, I don't listen to Oasis or Blur. Like that's too Buzz Clip on empty. No, I'm much more alternative than that. I've got this whole Kate Bush.
I'm much
catalog.
more alternative than that. I listen to Pulp, which is
exactly Pulp. Right, same one. That was another one. I've read the Pulp CD.
Pulp, which was if you're taking the 90s, 60s dynamic. If Oasis and Blur are the Beatles and Rolling Stones of the 90s, then Pulp is like the Kinks or the Herman Hermits, or like they're a bit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's and I've heard people say this, but people go, well, a lot of people talk about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, but the Kinks were the best band of the 60s. Now, don't get me wrong, the Kinks are a great band. They're an awesome band. But saying they're the best band of the 60s is pretentious, fringe bullshit, the way you're just trying to be like, well, I know about. It's the same thing that fucking Tarantino does in Death Proof, where he's all like, he has the woman be like, "Oh, you've never heard of Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Titch or whatever," and I'm like, "Stop, stop!" Like, we've heard of Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Titch, but there's a reason why they didn't crawl out of it in the '60s with everybody else. You've managed to find one song that fits your like Death Proof cool hipster bullshit, but that's it. Like, you're not telling me, Tarantino, that you sit at home at night and go, instead of putting on the White Album, I'm going to put on Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Titch. It's not the case. The White Album is a better album, period. It's not even an opinion. It's just fact. Anyway.
Yeah. I somebody recently, you know that the whole new thing now on Twitter is like, oh, here's this list of artists in some genre or movies in some genre or by some director or something. You can only choose so many of them. And one of them was like all these English bands. And, and you can only choose so many of them.
They did a great one earlier. I just want to interrupt. Where it was Dennis Villeneuve movies. And I just went, you can have them all because they all fucking suck.
Yes, I liked your reply to that. That was fantastic. Yeah. But the best one of those that anybody ever did was Mitch Lovell, the Video Vacuum. I think he was making fun of the whole thing. Yeah. He was like, name an actor who had a better 4-film run. And it was Wayne Newton in like, like The Running Man, and it's like
License to Kill, and
yeah, exactly. That was fantastic. So
Wayne Newton.
But it was like when somebody does like a thing like that, like, oh, name the best Englishman or something like that, it's just opening up the door for people to be pretentious and say how much they don't like the Beatles. Yeah, it's just like, here's the door. Okay, all the pretentious Beatles people that say you don't like the Beatles, but yet you secretly listen to Revolver or whatever.
But it's all the same. It's the same as Counterculture. It's value signaling. It's look at me, I know something you don't know.
Exactly.
Right? And it's funny. The only reason I know that is I get accused of it. When I talk about Cynthia Rothrock, to bring it back. Yeah. When I talk about Cynthia Rothrock, for example, I know that there are a bunch of people who are like, yeah, but you're just saying that blah, 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 like whatever, because, you want to seem like, and I'm like, no, actually, I'm saying that because if anybody, like, we go on all the time, and especially now about like strong female action leads, and I just recently wrote about the 2016 Ghostbusters again to try and kind of wrestle with that movie and stuff, and talk about the females' performances in that, which I think are fantastic. Even if the movie's not good, I think they're great in it. Yeah. And a lot of people are holding on to Captain Marvel and Brie Larson and stuff like that, and talking about that, and I honestly wish that a lot of those, while I'm behind a lot of those things, like, sure, talk about Ripley and Aliens, talk about Linda Hamilton and Terminator, talk about Xena or Buffy or whatever you want to talk about, but like, don't talk about it and then miss out on someone like Cynthia Rothrock, who, to me, if there's any time to rediscover her and rediscover the fact that of all the, and I've said this before in many articles, I just said it in my Writing Wrongs article as well about it on the website. You think of, and you know better than I do, but of all the 80s and 90s guys that came out who were in action, who had releases, right?
Yeah.
Everyone from your Van Dammes and your Segals right down to your Zagarinos and your, Jeff Speakmans and whatever, Gary Daniels, right? Even Jeff Speakman got a studio-funded movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Cynthia Rothrock, although she was obviously tied to Golden Harvest, which in the East was a huge movie studio and very, she never had an American cinematic release for any of her movies outside of 42nd Street playing the odd martial arts movie, but that wasn't a release. She never had a cinematic release, and she, and even when she went straight to video, as all of her films ended up doing, there was not one straight to video releasing that really like backed her. You know what I mean? She had to be attached to like a Jalal Mary or Richard Norton or God forbid like a Godfrey Ho or someone. Yeah, but not just her co-stars, but I mean the distributors were the more lower rent distributing houses. She only did the one PM Entertainment movie. You know what I mean? Like, why wasn't PM Entertainment hiring her for every film out the gate? She never did a Canon film. Like, Canon never put her in a film. So we're not even talking about fucking Universal, Paramount, Sony, whatever. I'm talking about like the lower tier guys. And it's why so many of her films are difficult to find now, unless, like me, you kind of will dredge stuff up on DVD even. I don't care what format. Like, I have her movies on VHS and DVD and Blu-ray and everything. But I think it's why it's important we keep talking about her. It's not me trying to look like, hey, I know someone, that you don't know. If I was going to do that about female action stars, I'd be talking about like Lady Terminator or something, you know what I mean? Or the other person in Righting Wrongs, and I'm going to forget her name now, but her co-star in Righting Wrongs, who she fights against, who did a couple of her own.
Karen Shepard.
Karen Shepard, who did a couple of releases, but
she was
nothing.
a Terminator woman.
Right, Terminator woman, right. So, I could be dropping her name. I'm not. For me, my feeling is Cynthia Rothrock, when it comes to female martial artists, is as mainstream as they come. Yeah. It's just that no one's talking about female martial artists, unless it's Ronda Rousey cropping up in a movie doing, seventh fiddle to fucking some guy from Twilight or whatever.
Yeah.
I rewatched Expendables 3 the other day, and I'm just like, God.
Yeah, that was the worst. That movie, yeah.
Fucking people in that movie, and I'm like, really? You're gonna not have Cynthia Rothrock, but you're gonna have fucking Ronda Rousey and the Munch Bunch showing up? Right. Like, it's just, stupid.
Well, the thing about Rothrock, I think, so for me, in terms of sort of my rankings for some of these things, like, I had Rothrock as sort of for direct-to-video stars. I kind of have her tied for third with Don the Dragon Wilson after, like, Dolph and Fred Williamson. Yeah. I'm beginning to wonder with Dolph if maybe he needs to come down a bit, and some of them need to go up more, just because, I mean, he had a lot of great DTV stuff, but it's like some of the stuff that they were doing is kind of even, if I kind of delve into it a little bit more, I think maybe I just have this affinity for Dolph. But I mean, Fred Williamson, obviously, just kind of another level. But when I watch the Rothrock stuff, I mean, Rothrock, just from a pure athletic standpoint, I mean, there aren't many. I mean, Dolph obviously was a supreme athlete. Somebody like a Matthias Hughes or Michael Jai White. There aren't many that were as athletic as she is. And, you talk about Ronda Rousey, Gina Carano is one who obviously talking about being canceled. She's someone who's been canceled as well. But they are great athletes. But Rothrock was like, I mean, she was like putting her in with the men, she was one of the best athletes. I think she might have been a better athlete than Don the Dragon, who was as top-notch,
Yeah, the only difference between her and Don the Dragon is Don the Dragon, even while he was making movies, continued to do prize fights.
Right,
so,
exactly.
She, in the ring, she only ever did like forms and weapons, right? That was what she did, and that's what she won in the ring. However, training and so on behind closed doors, she has more black belts than Chuck Norris in a variety of different disciplines. She continues to teach and train to this day, and has done for decades. And as you say, incredibly athletic, did 98% of her own stunts in the Hong Kong films that she's in. To the point where, and if you've seen her interview with Scott Adkins on The Art of Action, like, she busted both her knees very, very early on. Right. Never had them reset, never had them looked at, whatever. Literally fought through the pain, and her knees are now at this point like stronger than anybody else's knees, or whatever it is. I don't know all the stuff, but go watch The Art of Action with Scott Adkins, and he explains it all. But essentially, took her blows along. Like, she got to Hong Kong, hardly anyone spoke English to her apart from like the person who was kind of ingratiating her to the cast and crew or whatever. And most of those Hong Kong movies were at least some level of contact, if not full contact. In fact, very often stunt performers or other martial artists would just say, please just kick me, like, for the purposes of this thing. Right. They were 6-month shoots. They were long, grueling 6-month shoots. To all accounts, from high in the Hong Kong, from Sammo Hung and Yan Bio and other people who she worked with, a consummate professional, never complained, did the work, stood up to the men, did whatever she needed to do, without it ever being, I mean, she always talked about the fact that when she started, there weren't a lot of women in her field, but she never made it a, course celeb or whatever. She was just like, I'm out there and I'm doing my thing, and fucking, watch me And there's a real tragic situation, which was that Golden Harvest was going to give her 3 more movies, and Sylvester Stallone came to her in the 80s and said, "There's this movie being made by who was it? It was William Hill or
I think so. I was talking with Tom Jolliffe because he was on recent podcast we did that hasn't released yet. We did China O'Brien and Lady Dragon, and he was talking about this situation that the movie sat on the shelf and she was turning down projects because she thought this was.
Well, she broke her contract with Golden Harvest in order to do this movie.
Yeah.
And the movie never came to be, and Stallone never called her back. So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, the flip side of that is, even after Golden Harvest said, no, thank you, we're breaking the contract, it's not like Jackie Chan and Yen Bio and Sammo Hung and others who respected her didn't continue to make movies. So why they didn't just, put her in those movies, I don't know. I would have loved to have seen her, with a Jackie Chan or even a Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothrock. I know they did Yes, Madam, but like another vehicle. So yeah, very, very odd that her career went into kind of the straight to video realm, and like we said, not even necessarily some of the big purveyors of that, sort of lower down. But what I will say is that I constantly go back and I constantly rewatch and reevaluate Rothrock movies, because I remember when I first was collecting, and I first started collecting Rothrock films. And I remember watching Rage and Honor and Rage and Honor 2 when they first started back in the day. I remember not liking them as much because they don't really stack up against either China O'Brien or Righting Wrongs or Yes, Madam or any of those. But actually now, having watched, a decade later, having watched way worse straight-to-video stuff and way worse B-movie stuff, Rage and Honor 1 and Rage and Honor 2, and we can go film by film, I don't mind, but they're certainly, when it comes down to the action and when it comes down to her and Norton, and they're always a good double act, her and Norton, and trying, and in this case, they're also executive producing, so I feel like they had a bit more of a hand in the action sequences and kind of stood up for. It ends up that these movies aren't actually that bad. Like when it comes to like straight to video Rothrock and Norton movies, there are worst examples out there. I just picked up the Tiger Claws trilogy, the Vinegar Syndrome released, and there's not a good movie. I mean, with all due respect, there's not a good movie amongst that franchise. Martial Law 1 and 2. 2 is far better than 1, and 1 underplays. Like, there's another example. You get her and like Chad McQueen.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Like literally, who the fuck, other than Steve McQueen's son or whatever. But like, and it sidelines Rothrock for Chad McQueen.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's looking at Chad McQueen's body of work right now, and if anyone was going to, it'd probably be you, Matt.
But even I'm not. No.
But even you're not. Rothrock is the one. So, I put Rage and Honor. I put it up there with like China O'Brien 2. It's sort of at that level. It's not as bad as Tiger Claws. And it's not necessarily as good as China O'Brien 1 or Martial Law 2. But it's up there with Martial Law. It's up there with China O'Brien 2. It's up there certainly with Guardian Angel and Sworn to Justice, some of her other key titles. And there was a lot I liked about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the Rage and Honor movies are a little bit unique in her catalog with Richard Norton in that I think a lot of times Richard Norton, when he acted opposite her, I think he wanted the world to see how great she was. I think he kind of knew who he was, and he knew the kind of figure he cut, and that a movie would probably want, a filmmaker would want to gravitate to making the movie about him. And he would always kind of take a step back and let it be about Rothrock. And I think like China O'Brien is a great example where he's really a supporting character, or Lady Dragon where he's the baddie in that one. And I think with these movies, I think, especially the first one, oh, I think you're muted. Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Lady Dragon such a disappointment.
Yes.
You have Norton, Rothrock, and Ginty. I mean, it should be, that's like a triumvirate right there.
Right.
And yeah, very, very sad that Lady Dragon is not the, it's just this scrappy shot in Indonesian kind of,
right. Exactly. But yeah, with the Rage and Honor movies, I think the first one in particular was really supposed to be more Rothrock centric, but it does feel like it's they're more buddy pictures, that Rothrock and Norton have equal parts in both films, and I kind of it makes them a little bit unique in her filmography, but I do like them both in that sense. I mean, one of the stories I've been reading the oral history of PM Entertainment on the Hopes and Fears online magazine. They were talking about, I guess, when they did Guardian Angel, that there was some like character who from Mexico or something who was like playing, who was going to be in the movie, and I guess he did a scene with Norton, and he made some comment like, oh, does Cynthia Rothrock hit as hard as you do? And he's like, no, she hits harder, and so it was like, like he, I think, always really loved her talent, really respected her talent, and I think one of the things that makes these movies good, and I think, as we talk about the Rage and Honor movies, they're a couple personal favorites of mine. Like they're kind of like, I think they're the kind of ones that are kind of close to my heart, as ones that I just, really like watching her in them. I mean, the first one, I think you get some really fun scenes with like her fighting some guys at an ATM machine, stuff like that I think. They
take that Hong Kong sensibility of, so there's two, like Hollywood action films the action tends to be part of whatever the ongoing plot is. In Hong Kong, they'll have an action sequence, just for the sake of having an action sequence, right?
Right.
So my feeling about that sequence at the ATM in Rage and Honor, it's a very Hong Kong way to be like, oh, by the way, for the rest of the movie, this lady kicks ass. Like, you need to know that this lady kicks ass. So here is an establishing scene that has nothing to do with anything else,
right,
where this lady kicks ass, and while we're establishing that she kicks ass, here is this random teen with a video camera who's also going to kind of become involved in the thing. So it's a really great setup scene. But the other thing that Rage and Honor, both of them do very nicely, and this is sort of my benchmark for straight to video action, is, every 6 or 7 minutes, give me something.
Yes. Like
I'm going to accept that although I think Rothrock's a perfectly decent actor, and even Norton has his moments, but I'm going to accept that the plot is going to be nonsense. I'm going to accept that the acting is not going to win any awards. But, one of my biggest problems with Norris, everyone goes on and on about Norris, is when you watch a Norris film, it's 90% Norris acting, something nobody ever needs to see, and about 10% action. And even though the action might be at certain points impressive or laughable, like the end of Lone Wolf McQuade, where you just see two middle-aged golfers twatting at each other. But I mean, the metrics are all off. I don't want to watch Norris act. I have no interest in Norris having a love scene or whatever. Like, I remember someone telling me to go see, what's the one where he fights basically Michael Myers? The one where he's up against the like super.
Oh,
I forget what it is. It's like the Silent Rage, is it? The Silent,
Silent Rage, yes.
So Silent Rage. I remember everyone going on, oh, John, you'd love Silent Rage. Martial artist versus Michael Myers, Indestructible Killing Machine versus Chuck Norris. It's the best film ever, blah, 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 blah. 40 minutes into it, I'm like, is he going to punch anybody? He was standing around in a kitchen having very wooden dialogue with a woman. I'm like, I have no interest in whatever this kitchen sink drama is. Whereas the thing that Norton and Rothrock know full well from their Hong Kong days, and why Rage and Honor works, because they're both producers on it, I think, is that, 5, 6, 7 minutes don't go by without someone punching someone falling off something, or something exploding. And that's really all that needs to happen. And on and above that, Rage and Honor at least also has a really solid MacGuffin. They go, here's this kid, he caught something on tape, and now everybody, whether it's the police, the crooked police, the bad guys, or Rothrock or Norton, they're all after the tape. And that's all you need. You just need something to drive, and the tape changes hands, and 1 minute they have it, and 1 minute they don't have it, or whatever. Yeah. The only objection I have to all of Rage and Honor is that at the very end, how difficult would it have been, right, to have gone down to I was about to use a British reference and say Rumbelows. Rumbelows is not something you know what I'm talking about. What was over here that wasn't Circuit City and wasn't Best Buy, and everyone was like, Radio Shack.
Radio
Right.
Shack, yeah.
You could have easily gone down to Radio Shack, Norton, bought another DMV or video cassette tape, written on it, blah, 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 and handed that over to the woman at the end of the movie instead of, or you could have duped the tape. You could have duped the existing tape, not told anyone, handed her the tape, and she could have torn it up or whatever. So the only objection I have is that at the end of the film, like, the tape has essentially meant nothing, and Norton has to go off and hide. But that at least, I suppose, sets up part two. But apart from that, it's got a really nice, strong MacGuffin, some great ideas in it, and they don't really explain how this teacher at a high school, or whatever she is, I don't really know what she is, teacher at a high school, can do martial arts any more than they explain in the second one why the teacher from high school suddenly became a CIA agent. There's no explanation. It's fine. It doesn't matter. We don't need to. We assume it was in the script and they went on.
Well, I thought what happened was that her parents were killed, hers, and so the other thing too is we find out that her brother is played by Brian Thompson. So great, who it looks like he has a mullet tacked onto the back of his hair. Like, that looks like it's his business in the front and party in the back, but it's almost like fake. It's just sort of like this thing just sort of sprouting out of the back.
It's party at the back, but no one's going to that particular party.
Right, exactly. It's a bad right. It's the kind of party that, like, the non-cool kid in school's parents would throw to try to get that non-cool kid some friends. That's the kind of party in the back that we're looking at here with that. But
that's exactly. And you're reminding me now. We do find out about why she's a martial artist because of the sensei being killed by Brian Thompson.
Right. He takes them in, I think, when they're kids, and then they learn. He teaches them martial arts, and then Brian Thompson, I guess, avenges the parents' deaths, and the sensei doesn't like that. Something along those lines. So Brian Thompson goes off and becomes this great criminal who, runs some large criminal enterprise in L.A., whereas Rothrock is just doing her own thing. And then Richard Norton, which, talking about, our ginger jokes from the Critters episode on your podcast, this film is chock full of Aussie jokes, which I didn't even know that was like a form of joke, that I didn't know that Aussie's going to maybe this is a warning to any Aussies listening to this, that I guess hopefully now LA is a more tolerant environment for Aussies, but at least in this film, it seems like you're just waiting for a kangaroo joke or something else.
Right.
Go back.
Well, it's the rule that you can insult other white nations.
Right.
So it's okay to insult, like the English and the Irish can go back and forth at each other and tell jokes about each other. And, the English can make jokes about Australians. Right. Americans can make jokes about Australians. Sort of white nations can kind of take the piss out of each other. That's where... the Germans are the butt of everybody's joke, as they should be, because fuck those people.
Yes,
I'm joking to all the Germans listening. You know what I mean? There's one German listener who's like, it's so sad. I will go out and cry now. Well, I think I just did the same joke on my recent podcast. But okay.
What is it? Was it Hurricane Smith? The film that Carl Weathers did in Australia. I found out that the Aussie term for Americans is septic tanks or septics. That's what they call Americans. So we're
because they have that rhyming slang like the Cockneys do. So septic tank, yank is American, right? So they also love to add O's at the end of everything. Everything's a doco. Right. Or a shoe-o or a hat-o or something. They just they put O's at the end of everything, which is absolutely fine. That's allowed and it's all good.
Yeah. So that's what we have here is Richard Norton, who he's come to America. We don't really know why. His partner was killed in Australia, but I think he's trying to is he tracking down this baddie? Is that why he's in America? But whatever he's doing in America, he discovers that there is corruption in this L.A.
Everyone in the police force is corrupt,
right? Including Catherine Bach, who played Daisy Duke. She's in this. Doesn't wear Daisy Dukes. Wears much more clothing in this. Really, everybody, all the women except for the gang, the gang that's run by I can't remember the actress's name, who's did a bunch of stuff. This is horrible that I can't remember her name.
The gang is my favorite thing about this movie.
Yeah,
the fact that there is. Yeah, so there's the bad guy portrayed by Brian Johnson. He with the face that looks like it's gone through a car accident and then been rebuilt by the Smurfs or something.
It looks like a He-Man figure's face. Like it looks like it was crafted out of plastic.
Well, it looks like a He-Man figure's face if the bad kid in the neighborhood had put the He-Man figure in the fire for a few minutes. You know what I mean? So you have him. He's trying to get the tape because he runs the. He has a sultry, redheaded female partner who goes out and does. He just stays at home all day,
exactly, yeah.
and just hits the bag or watches TV or does meditation or masturbates or whatever he does. Right. He does a lot of different things, and she goes out and does all the dirty work for him. The redheaded woman, sultry woman, and she runs the cops who are dirty. And they are dealing drugs or guns or something. And then there is this underground group of women that are sort of like Mad Max or Furiosa or something, kind of women living on the edge of society in the sewers, having their own ad hoc fight matches whenever they want. And doing some criminality, but not really. Like, I don't know, they're sort of involved, but not sort of involved. And sometimes they work for Brian Thompson, and sometimes they don't. So it's very weird. It's just a weird thing. But I like it, because what it is it's like, how do we add yet another bizarre element of something that might be popular to this thing? Well, the Italians would probably put a group of women in, like, futuristic looking leather garb in the sewer. They would do that in a Fred Williamson movie, so let's do it in our movie.
Yeah, and what you're right is about this is that it all works because we get fight scenes every 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, the ATM scene. The thing that always gets me about the ATM scene is it is a very antiquated ATM, and it looks like from an 80s sitcom when ATMs were new, and it just seemed like whenever a TV show was running out of ideas, they did let's use the ATM, it's malfunctioning and suddenly spitting out tons of money at us episode, here's Alice with Mel from Mel's Diner, get his hand stuck in the ATM and it's spitting out money, and look at, hilarity ensues. I mean, it's that kind of ATM that she's using. Yeah,
it is. Same in the Fast and Furious franchise, where Ludacris is able to reprogram the ATM, using magic science to spit money out all over everybody.
Yeah. Well, because that's the thing, right? The two, magical sci-fi elements that you can put in an action film without making it sci-fi or magical. One is the ninja, right? The ninja can do magic things, and then the other is computers. Yeah. Computers can do magic things.
Computers can do whatever magic they need to do.
Exactly.
But yeah, like you say, it's odd as well, because obviously Brian Thompson, who's known for sort of the bad guy in Cobra, that's probably his most. He's treated here a little bit like the cameo actor. So like throughout B movies and throughout low budget movies, you have this thing of the cameo actor, and they have someone in for 3 days. They shoot them in 1 or 2 locations, and then they distribute them throughout the movie, so it feels like they're a main part of the film when really they were only on set. His scenes feel that way because he's shot for most of the film in one room. You know what I mean? Just kind of occasionally making out with a redheaded woman or hitting a bag or talking about his sister or whatever. Like, he doesn't really do very much. And then at the very end, he has sort of a final fight scene. And that's the second location. He's like, you get me for 2 locations, but that's it. Yeah. If his face is in more than 3 locations, he spontaneously combusts or something.
Right. And it's funny because, so you've got this he plays his character Drago, and so what happens is that they're trying to frame Richard Norton for murdering this police officer, and he has the video. There's the video of this kid who skateboards, makes the tape, and he sort of passes it off into this underground where kind of as MacGuffins are wont to do, gets passed around, and who's got the tape and who has it, and and so Norton wants to clear his name. At the same time, Rothrock wants to get revenge on her brother, and I think it all works in that vein of, like, these two action stars. I mean, I think there's the interesting thing is when they make them fight each other, and you're kind of wondering how they're going to maneuver around that. And actually, again, even that scene works where the two of them fight each other. I think for both of them as a showcase. I mean, and Norton, I think I'm wondering what this is, if because it's got Rothrock all over the cover of all the copies of it. I wonder though, in making the movie, if they just really liked what Norton was doing and they thought, let's kind of make them have equal parts in the film as opposed to it being a Rothrock vehicle. Because the way the fight scene happens at the end where Rothrock fights Brian Thompson, that's definitely this is a Rothrock vehicle kind of fight.
Right.
But there's still a lot of Norton.
But then doesn't Norton have to come in and finish off the fight, right?
Yeah, what does he do? He does something, right?
Because Rothrock's getting the better of Thompson.
Yeah.
But then Thompson goes over the edge.
Yeah.
She helps him back up.
Yeah.
And when she helps him back up, he takes advantage of that and I think throws her over the edge.
Right. Yeah.
She survives the fall, but Norton has to finish him off. Which I suppose is a good way of, how do we? And I think I would actually say this was probably an equal footing movie just because they're both also producers on it. I don't know what the embryonic stage of this film was or who scripted it or how that came out, but it's the best way I've seen of how do we have a climactic fight where you have two protagonists and one antagonist.
Yeah.
You get to see Cynthia Rothrock beat up Brian Thompson, which is what you want.
Yeah.
She then saves him, which makes her the moral superior.
Yeah.
He then throws her over, but she survives. And then Norton finishes him off in revenge of her.
Yeah.
So it's a good. I don't know how else you would do it, because if you had Rothrock sidelined and Norton fought, and then Norton went over, and then Rothrock came in and finished, it wouldn't be enough Rothrock, right? You would feel cheated out of Rothrock.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't mind Norton coming in and finishing him off because Rothrock did the right thing.
Yeah.
Rothrock could have finished him off. Rothrock could have punched him in the face and he could have fallen off the thing. Right. Yeah. So the fact that they did that the way they did that, I think actually really works. Plus you have the idea that Norton then has to go off into the night, and is now a fugitive.
Yeah.
That helps. I think that adds to sort of his mystique or whatever and sets up the sequel. And similarly, when you look at the sequel, Rage of Honor 2, the first half is sort of Norton's movie, and then Rothrock comes in and kind of takes over the movie. So I think between the two films, whether they were planned as, Rage and Honor 2 feels a lot to me like another script that they decided, well, Rage and Honor worked once, so let's just retool this to make Rage and Honor 2. I don't think it was written as Rage and Honor 2.
Yeah.
But however they retrofitted it works, and it works to give between both movies an even balance of one and the other, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I think one of the things I think too about the first one, more than the second one in terms of Norton, we were talking about like 80s, British pop stars. I mean, he kind of has that look, right? Like his face is like, it looks like it's made up a little bit more. He's got like maybe some black eyeliner. He's got the earring and the hair and everything. And it feels like when they make him the second movie, it's almost like maybe he looked at himself in there and said, I look like a, the guitarist from Johnny Hates Jazz, or like Spandau Ballet or something like that. It's like I need to, I need to be.
Now I just want to see an action franchise starring the bass player from Johnny Hates Jazz.
Yes,
That's really what I'm.
Yeah. But it was something along those lines, and so it seems when you get into Rage and Honor 2, his hair is a little bit longer. The look is a little bit rougher. It's it's not as British pop star-y, I guess, as
Yeah. But he's still wearing, I don't know where he found it, but it's a very thin, he wears like a long trench coat, like a black trench coat, but it's basically just a thin cotton, you know what I mean? It's almost like I don't know what, it's like a pashmina with arms or something. Like it's just, it's very weird, or like a gi without a rope. tie or something. It's just a weird, but he wears it, like he works it, like it's perfect for Norton. If Norton isn't wearing that coat, I would worry about what's wrong with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would go up and say, everything all right, mate. Like, that's fine. I don't mind. I'll like the coat. The coat's great. Now it doesn't quite have the Rage and Honor has the does have the last scene, which has the callback to the joke,
right?
Which is how are you finding LA or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then he goes, oh, it doesn't matter or whatever, and then
Right.
drives off. It's not quite the last line of China O'Brien, which Richard Norton steals the whole film by saying, let's go discuss it over a beer. And you don't get that at the end of Rage and Honor, although he does have a little like back and forth with the guy who picks him up because he's hitchhiking at the end of the movie. Right. But it's not classic Norton, but it's good enough for what it is. But yeah, and then his moment to shine out of both films, I feel like, is the Benny's fight in Rage and Honor 2, where I think honoring Monty Python somehow, there's not only a comedy parrot, but he picks up a giant raw fish and beats a bad guy around the face with it, like the fish slapping dance. I don't know if it's intentional or whether they just happen to have a comedy rude parrot and a fish lying around and thought, let's use it. But either way, I'm here for it, and I want more of Norton doing that. Because he is the martial arts answer to John Cleese. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just in height and silliness.
Right. Yeah. And it's another example kind of baddie in a can kind of approach, where it's like, guys who come into, some poor, like this, struggling business. I don't know if he's struggling, but, guy who's trying to make it with his own business. And you get these toughs who come in looking for protection money. You just want to see Richard Norton go in there and beat them about a face with the raw fish. Like you just, you
and I think if there's any mistake about Rage and Honor 2, it's the fact that it's always the same group of guys.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's always the same 5 guys. You're like, how many times does Norton and Rothrock have to hand this blonde wanker his ass before? And it means that at the end of the movie, when he faces off with him, you don't feel like there's much of a challenge. Yeah. What Rage and Honor 2 has is the twist ending, which I thought was nice. I mean, both of the movies are structured really nicely. Like more attention to the script than most action movies, to be fair. Yeah. And whether it's the MacGuffin in part 1, which I think works very successfully, or the twist in part 2, which I think also works. It's a bit predictable, but it's also successful. It just between the two movies, they have all the elements. Like the second movie, you have Norton training the dead guy's son, and you think they're gonna kind of go all revengey together, and it's gonna be this big thing. But you get a bit of training montage in the second one. You know what I mean? I think the only thing where the second one falls down is the fact that it's the same 5 guys who always show up. There isn't a variety of hoods, but that's probably because they were shooting in Jakarta, and there probably was only a handful of white Anglo-Saxons hanging around, or at least American speakers or English speakers hanging around. And they don't, for some reason, lean into having kind of Indonesian bad guys, or that there's not. I mean, the main mob boss is Indonesian, but outside of that, it's mostly all his henchmen are all American or English or Australian or whatever.
Yeah, and what we get, I think, with the one henchman, the Thor character played by was it Thomas Vreeken? Is that the name?
Ron Vreeken.
Ron Vreeken played.
Ron
Thor.
Is such a great name. Ron. Hello, I'm Ron. Yeah. What are you doing? I'm Ron. Hi, how are you? I'm Ron. Ronald. It's short for Ronald. Yeah.
And his mullet is like, overall he's just a poor man's Matthias Hughes. That's really what his raison d'etre is. But at least his mullet is like it kind of rights all the wrongs of the Brian Thompson
real
mullet.
Hair for starters.
Yes.
I don't know about righting all the wrongs. I mean, it's just as wrong.
Right. Yeah.
I think it doubles down on the wrong. The only right about it is that it's his real hair as opposed to a tuft of cushion stuffing that Brian Thompson is glued to his head. But yeah, apart from that, it's that's what right.
From in terms of like mullitude, I mean, it's definitely a 10 on the mullet. I mean, there's a scene where he fights Norton, and the first thing he does is kind of brush it off his shoulders. I've got to just brush this mullet aside here, and which is just a beautiful thing. It's like he's so enamored with his mullet that he just can't stop playing with it. It seems like, and as a baddie, it's like I think the thing I liked about it is that he really wasn't developed beyond the fact that he's big, he's got a mullet, and he's the henchman of Bun Tao, the bad guy, and that's enough for us to want to see Norton kick him in the face. Like that's it doesn't take much more than that, and I think that's where 90s action movies really hit their stride, is when they know like it doesn't take much to develop characters. Like we don't need a lot of development. We need fight scenes. We need action scenes. And it's like, and again, with these two characters, I mean, I think the thing that they try to do with that is they almost try to give us like a amuse-bouches with the fight with Thor and Norton, where it's like, oh, let's fight, and then the police show up. Oh, let's fight. Oh, something else something, some gunfire happens and it stops the fight and things like that. So it's almost like but like you said, we also kind of get the sense that like Norton can take this guy at any time. So when they actually fight at the end, there's really no suspense in it.
And I wonder if he's not a contemporary of Norton's just because his first movie was Hurricane Smith, which was, as you said, shot in Australia. Yeah. He also shows up in Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles. Yeah. He's in The Island of Dr. Moreau, and he also does stunts on Mission Impossible 2, which of course was filmed down under. So I wonder, I haven't looked much further than that, but I've got to wonder that he is probably a Australian contemporary of Norton's. And he was like, oh, Ronald, could you maybe grow out the hair and dye blonde, please? We need a equally ridiculous mullet, and I know that you love to grow a mullet. Freaking. So why don't you go ahead, old Ronnie boy? And he went, all right, mate, and drank copious amounts of Foster's Lager and let his hair grow. Probably that's what happened.
Yeah, it's funny. I take for granted that because his last name's Rieken that he's from the Netherlands, but it's just as possible that he went to Australia just as much as anybody like Colin Hay or whoever, whatever, people from England that go to, sort of escape to, start a new life in Australia. He could have just as easily been like, oh,
Yeah, I don't see much information about him other than his credits. I don't see, even on IMDb, there's no Wikipedia entry about him that I can find. And there's no...
Yeah, just what he fights in, what his, Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
He's like a champion of martial arts that I can't pronounce right now.
Where are you seeing that?
That's in the trivia section for him on IMDb.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't even see that.
Yeah. It's Australian. Oh, you're right, though. Australian martial arts expert. So he is from Australia. So I think he affects an accent, though, for this, doesn't he?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, he's trying to.
He's certainly not Australian, but yeah. Oh, I see what you mean. He's Kyoku Shinkai, Kyoku Shinkai, karate, judo, aikido, and Dutch kickboxing. Yeah. I love that there's Dutch kickboxing. Yeah. Does that involve clogs? Like, do you wear clogs while kickboxing? Having a lot of cheese on toast while kicking people with clogs.
Exactly.
What is that you're doing there, Ronnie? It's a bit of the old Dutch kickboxing. You just got to wear wooden shoes, really. I mean, it's regular kickboxing, but you just got to put on the clogs, maybe eat a little bit of cheese on toast, and away you go. Maybe you do it while cycling. Maybe that's...
I wonder if the Dutch kickboxing is where... I wonder if they're the ones that invented the windmill kick, and that's where he learned the windmill kick. That's because he does sport Norton sports the windmill kick a couple times in both Rage and Honor movies.
You've got a bunch of people listening now who are like, listen, I have there are lots of great people in Netherlands and Holland who are doing lots of great work in the work of kickboxing, and you're like, no one said there wasn't. Anyway, but yeah,
Yes, I'm going to be looking at the stats for this podcast, and
for the
suddenly,
Dutch kickboxer.
yeah, suddenly like the Netherlands just drops down to like the one person from the Netherlands who was listening is suddenly so yeah, suddenly, the only thing about the Netherlands that I always remember is that when we did a school trip to England, you could pay a certain amount of money to do like a boat trip to.
You could pay a certain amount of money to have a Dutch person show up and shit on you.
I can't remember what it was.
I will take shit on your chest for $5.
I think it was something like if you paid like £60, you get a boat to the Netherlands, and we were like, oh, maybe we should do that for a day, and say we went to the Netherlands, and then of course by the time we got there and we were just happy that we could drink in bars at 18, we didn't have any expendable money to be able to take nor to be care to take a ferry to the Netherlands at that point. But so that was the time I almost went to the Netherlands. I've never actually been before, so.
I am listening. Sorry, can we pause just for a second? I don't want to. I know you got to edit this, and I don't want you to have to edit this.
That's all right. No, I took a sip of coffee at the same time, so I'm I've got my Dunkin' Donuts where I heard Kate Bush is running up the hill when I was in there getting the coffee. So
it's coming up to 6 o'clock, so I'm going to have to wrap up soon. Sorry, just because
that's all right.
Mrs. and I've got to have dinner.
Yeah, but no, I think with this movie, I think with both of these movies, I think. One is that they're both available on Tubi, which I know, with the commercials like that, it's not always the best version. I think.
But no, if it's the only version online, watch it online. Yeah, wherever you can.
But I think what you're talking about, I mean, China O'Brien is one that you can't find anywhere. China O'Brien is one that's like it's only available on VHS, and you got to pay out the nose for the VHS.
There is a European release with both movies on DVD, which I think you can get on Amazon for about $20.
But is it region free or is it?
No, it says it's region B, but I bet if you got most DVDs that are that low rent kind of releases, like when we were doing Dr. Action, for example, Paul used to send me a whole bunch of region B DVDs that actually, when you put in the player, they weren't. So, but I'm not guaranteeing it. They could be region B,
yeah, because I think one of the things maybe. Is I think like you mentioned buying the Tiger Claw series. I didn't buy those on Blu-ray, but I'm kind of wondering if I should start buying some more of those so that like I can kind of do my part to convince these distributors to start putting more of her stuff. Because I think one of the things that always hurts my heart is when you see like when you go to like some website that talks about the top 10 female action stars and they don't list Rothrock anywhere on the list. And
right.
I think that always hurts my heart because she is, for me, it's like, I think maybe Pam Grier, Michelle Yeoh, and then Rothrock.
All three of those should be on the list. And if they're not on your list, then your list is horseshit.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? Because very often on those lists of action movie stars, female stars, they list actors who full well don't do any of their own stunts, don't do any of their own martial arts, yet they claim to be, because they claim to be great action stars because they have a stunt person do their work. You know what I mean? And look, that's fine. I don't need, I'm not like Seagal where he's like, if you're not a real action martial artist, then I'm not interested, and I don't know if you've seen that interview with him, but someone asked him about like Van Damme and Michael J. White and Scott Adkins and other people, and he's just like, do you want me to laugh in your face? Right. And I'm like, well, Michael J. White is a legitimate martial artist, and say what you like about Van Damme, whether he ever fought or didn't fight or whatever, he's a legitimate martial artist. Like he's a kickboxer and an athlete and whatever. Like he's got as much fucking action cred as big fat old Seagal standing around and painted hair and but Matt Damon, for example, in the Bourne movies, is neither a martial artist nor an athlete. Did he get in shape? Did he train to do some stuff? Sure.
Right.
But he's an actor who happens to have like some fight scenes that were, probably choreographed predominantly with stunt people. Yeah. And that's fine. That's because the most of Bourne films are him acting. And if you want someone acting, Matt Damon's fine. Right. But if you're doing a B-movie action, a straight-to-video action, or like John Wick's probably the exception because while Keanu Reeves is not what you would consider a martial artist, he has 4 decades trained in martial arts.
Yeah.
The gunplay that in John Wick, he does a lot of that himself.
Yeah.
The John Wick films may only take a couple of months to make, but they are 8 months in prep for him to. So that's maybe a gray area there, because once you've done as much martial arts on camera as Reeves has in the last few years, you could call him a martial artist at this point. Has he ever competed? Would he ever compete? Blah, 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 blah. No, but I don't know. For my money, Matt, and I don't know where you feel, public exhibition or competing or anything like that, that's a certain level of authority, but it has nothing to do with movie making.
Right.
You know what I mean? The fact that Don the Dragon Wilson had all those title fights that he won, that doesn't make his movies any better. Like right. Chuck Norris is, a renowned martial artist, good friends with Bruce Lee, blah, 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 blah. But cinematically, it's awful, right? So I always like to think that there's a gray area between being an actual martial artist and being someone who can do that shit on camera. Yeah. And the good thing about Rothrock is that she is that. Yeah. Like straight down the middle. She can do it on camera, but she can do it in real life. And because so much of her training and her exhibitions were forms and weapons, what that actually means, that's almost better training for movies than full contact fighting, because what it means is you can do all the elaborate physicality that you want to see on camera, the athleticism and the poses and the whatever, without necessarily having to know how to really beat someone up. Right. Now, the fact that since then she's got black belts in, I think, 7 different disciplines, she could kick the shit out of anybody at this point. I'm not denying that. But I just mean the fact that she started off where she starts off, it cements her martial art cred. It cements the fact that, along with Karen Shepard, she was one of the first women to win a lot of exhibitions, as was Karen Shepard. I mean, Karen Shepard was legitimately, I think, the first woman to win a martial arts demonstration, but Cynthia then won more than she did after her. But either way, to forge out the career that she did, with the skills that she had, is still incredibly impressive. And whatever we can do, and the nice thing is when I start to talk about Rothrock, I stop trying to be funny. I stopped trying to be blokey about it. I'm not talking about her, her looks or whatever. I'm talking about what she does in the movies. And if there's anything, and again, it's absolutely fine, but if there's anything that makes Rothrock a little interesting figure these days, talking about that, is that she's not very shy on social media. No. In terms of bikini pics and other things like that. She doesn't need to be. For the woman of her age, she's a very attractive woman. But when I watch her films, even Sworn to Justice, which is sort of like her 90s erotic martial arts thriller or whatever, even Sworn to, I'm not watching it for that. It doesn't matter what she looks like. It's her skill, her talent, and the fact that she, I think a lot like Don the Dragon and even Jeff Speakman and others, they could do the fighting, but they worked on the acting. Yeah. And you do see it with each movie. She gets better and better, I think. And in Rage and Honor, she's sort of found her groove. It's a good middle of her career kind of, and I'm talking about her initial career, her sort of late 80s, mid 80s through to mid 90s. It's sort of a good middle, movie for that. If we say that her best work starts in 86 and her, last really true great work is probably Sworn to Justice in terms of the stuff that she's done, and that's 96. So she has a good strong 10 years where, even if there's the odd dud like Lady Dragon or Tiger Claws, you could watch any of those movies and it would be perfectly great. I mean, her Hong Kongs are obviously the best ones, and then the China O'Briens, which are sort of Hong Kong produced American movies, are probably the best ones, and certainly good gateway movies. But any of the early to mid 90s stuff that she does is also very good and fine. And
yeah, I think she's an important figure. I mean, one of the things that you're talking about these movies, I mean, the only other woman who was helming action franchises at that time is Donna Spear in the Sedaris movies, when he kind of diminishes the Abilene who can't shoot straight character in Savage Beach. He turns it over to her. So the fact that the only other woman who's even coming close to doing what Rothrock was doing in the United States is Donna Spear, who, you know, former Playmate, who's, you know, I mean, I think her as an action lead was, you know, still really important that she was doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, it wasn't a big pond that Rothrock was swimming in. And, you know, she was making it happen there. And I think, like you said, cinematically, her action looks fantastic on screen. And
no one else has this. I mean, outside of the men, outside of Gary Daniels, outside of Jess Pinkman, out of all these people we mentioned, no one had a career like this. I mean, she was making, you know, at her height, she's making 4 or 5 movies on 2 or 3 continents every single year at her height. And, you know, and again, she's still at it now. You know, her later films, the Mercenaries and the Showdown in Manilas of the world are, you know, I mean, they're for hardcore fans only. I don't expect anyone to go out and watch them. But, you know, with her, what she has done on social media, which is very successful, and talking to someone like Scott Adkins and also doing the odd interview with other martial artists, and also, you know, as I say, not being shy in a way, it's brought her back to the forefront. It's showing people that, you know, she's still an act, you know, because she shares her workout routine, she shares diving, she shares her travels, she shares her martial arts training. It's showing people that she's still viable. It doesn't matter what age she is. She looks better than most 40-year-olds, and certainly more limber than most 40-year-olds, and still a renowned and repeatedly honored martial artist by the, you know, when you see the number of conferences and award ceremonies and things that she attends, you know, and say what you like about award ceremonies, and there does seem to be a lot of them, but like around the world, she is known, she is honored, she is, you know, the Grand Dragon and so on, in so many of these different things, and so many different disciplines. And you know, still, so when you look at her output in 2022 and coming in 2023, she's working and working and working. There's no stopping. Now, will any of them harken back to her heyday? I don't know. You know, we've entered a weird situation where there's a lot of B-movie action still being made, but it lacks the consistency that it used to in the 80s and 90s. And there's really only a few directors out there. Like, I'll watch anything that Jesse V. Johnson does, for example. I think he's a action director working in the same kind of B tier that you know, PM and others were working in the 80s and 90s, but he consistently at least knows what to do with a fight scene. I mean, even if he's not telling a story that you're interested in, he knows what to do with a fight scene. He pushed, you know, you look at Scott Adkins' Isaac Florentine work versus his Jesse V. Johnson work. His Isaac Florentine work might be, to some extent, more martial arts heavy and more martial art, like fancy martial arts, because Isaac Florentine is also a martial artist. But when you look at his Jesse V. Johnson work, it's his acting that has shot up. You know what I mean? I would love to see Jesse V. Johnson do a Cynthia Rothrock movie and be like, come on, let's really spend time on not only the action sequences, because I know how to shoot the hell out of it, but let's get some of that acting on screen with a you know, and he's done a female-driven action film recently, Hell Hath No Fury, and I could totally see him doing something. You know, Scott and Rothrock on their interview talked about working together. And, you know, if Stallone can still mumble about and play a superhero well into his 70s, Rothrock can. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not unheard of. Like, if they announced tomorrow that there was going to be another Alien movie and Sigourney Weaver was coming back, everyone would applaud it. So let's make China O'Brien 3. Come on, let's do it. Yeah. Yeah, Norton was just in Mad Max Fury Road, just did a bunch of stunts for Mad Max Fury Road. Norton's not slowing down either. Let's make it happen.
No, I agree completely. And I think, you know, I think the interesting thing with Jesse V. Johnson, I think, just to kind of talk about the acting piece with Atkins, I think part of the reason why his stuff with Atkins works so well in the sense of the acting, he always lets Atkins use his natural accent. He's always playing a Brit, which I think is like really, I mean, yes, I get it that Atkins he does a pretty good American accent, but it just, I don't know. He loses some of his charm.
Yeah,
So
it's like filmmakers realized very early on. Just same with Van Damme.
Yeah.
Explain why Jason Statham, a Brit, is in whatever situation he's in. Don't make Jason Statham try and pretend to be anybody other than Jason Statham. Because being Jason Statham is compelling, funny, interesting, whatever. Right. And it's the same with Scott Adkins. When you see him in Avengement, Scott Adkins being Scott Adkins and leaning right into his Britishness and harking back to The Long Good Friday and some of those movies, the Bob Hoskins of it all. That's one of the most compelling British movies of the last 2 decades. I don't care that nobody saw it and it'll be, just us action hounds who know about it. Avengement, it sits up there with me with Mona Lisa and Long Good Friday and Get Carter and Scum with Ray Winston and any of those Made in Britain with Tim Roth. It's got that vibe to it. It's, it's 50% gritty, shitty British prison movie and 50% like balls to the wall action fucking, and it's great. It's everything you want, right? And I think it's criminal that a movie like that, and I say the same thing about Statham's Hummingbird, which is redemption in this country. It's the same thing. Whenever Statham stretched himself a little bit to do something more in a kind of Bob Hoskins vein and less in the sort of transporter martial arts vein, I always loved. I think he is a legitimately good actor. No, everyone thinks I'm insane. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. But you watch Redemption of Hummingbird, or you watch like, what was the one he did, which is mainly just a detective thriller. He doesn't even really do any fighting in it. I want to call it Brick. It's not Brick. Fuck, can't remember the name of it now. But he's done a few of these. Statham's done the odd kind of like dramatic rather than full of action films. And I really, really like that. And I think someone like a Jesse V. Johnson or the Raid guy, Gareth Evans or whatever, could take a Rothrock and really, because the biggest problem when you watch the later Rothrocks, the 2000s Rothrocks, is nobody behind the camera knows what they're doing. Right. They go, well, we'll get Rothrock and she's a name, and we'll get Gary Daniels or someone and he's a name, whatever. But when it comes to the action, and Rothrock's spoken about that, she's like, when we did Hong Kong movies, we had months and months to do the action scenes. When I came over to America to do American movies, we had, hours to do the action scenes. Now the movies I'm doing, we have minutes to do the action scenes, right? And even in a movie where her and Don Wilson were driving it, like the martial arts kid, the person directing it has no idea how to make that action compelling, no matter how Don and Cynthia are doing on screen. And there's some okay fights in that film. It's not the best, but it's, if there's any later era Rothrock to watch, it's probably the martial arts kid. But the problem with a lot of these, like that fucking, there's that Russian guy,
Nevsky,
who for some reason keeps getting funding to make movies. Wouldn't know how to shoot an action scene if you you know what I mean, if you punched him repeatedly in the Johnson. Like, he's just, every movie I've watched with Nevsky in it, or that was Nevsky produced, and I'm suddenly like, oh my god, he's got Rothrock and Don the Dragon Wilson and
Olivia Gruner,
Olivia Gruner and whatever. Every time I watch them, I'm just like, oh god, it's interminable wank. I think he did Showdown in Manila, right?
Right. Yeah, it was directed by Dacascos, but it was like produced by. But it was like, I remember watching Showdown in Manila, and I'm like, the end of the movie.
It was directed by Dacascos. Yeah, how did I not know? It's so bad, though.
Yeah, I remember watching that at the end when they bring in, Rothrock and Gruner, and I'm like, why aren't they the leads of this movie? Right. Like, they should be the leads. Like, why is Nevsky the lead of this movie when they're all these like much more compelling people?
Yeah, I know, and it's odd, and I just, unless you have someone like, an Evans or a Johnson or or even if Adkins decides to direct, or even these stunt guys who are now, like the Chad Stahelski or whatever his name is, who's doing John Wick or whatever, like. They brought Dacascos back and put Dacascos in a major Hollywood movie as a villain. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, Rothrock and Keanu could trade some blows in a John Wick 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, how many films they're doing now. Should have stopped at 1, by the way, but okay.
Right. Well, like I was talking with Tom Jolliffe, the screenwriter, when he was on talking about China O'Brien and Lady Dragon. He was talking about like, maybe doing like a B movie Expendables and even if it's only just like a few names, even if it's like Wilson Rothrock and Gary Daniels or Daniel Bernhardt or somebody like that, even if it's just those few names, I think that would be, that could be kind of a
but
fun
you need, again, I just you need to do that. I would love to see that. And there's been some attempts. They've done comedy like The Extendables. They've done Mercenaries, which was sort of the female Expendables. But again, Mercenaries is a great example. You get all those people, right? You get those sets, you get everything. You get someone like Rothrock who can do all these moves for real. And then you get a bunch of other people who've sort of played action roles in the movies. You get, isn't Zoe Bell in that movie? Yeah,
yes,
Zoe Bell is like the lead in that movie. She's this incredible stunt woman.
Yeah.
Why is it a piece of shit? Like, no, but
it's an
again,
Asylum film, right? It's so,
right, but even Asylum, all Asylum need to provide is a director with some cameras and a warehouse, and that cast, and I could make a great movie.
Right. Well, because I think the director was Fred Olen Ray's son, I think, Christopher. But it was like you're watching that movie and you're like, what? Why is this not working? Right? Like you said, it's missing things that it needed. I mean, that's one of the things I think we talk about PM all the time. I mean, one of the best PM movies, Recoil. Gary Daniels does that. It's directed by Art Camacho, but it's action directed by Spiro. Is it Rosados?
Rosados, yeah, the stunt guy, who started with, I think he actually started on like Maniac Cop 2,
right? And
he worked with Lustig a lot. But yeah, PM gave him his action bones, and then he went on to do Fast and Furious, and
and so I think that's the thing too, is that like probably the Asylum, they don't have the money to get somebody to action direct or something like that. But obviously someone like an Art Camacho, stunt choreographer, martial, fight choreographer, all of that kind of thing. He knows enough to know I need to have an action director to, and Recoil is just, for me, Recoil is my favorite PM entertainment film. And I think, like you talk about, like Rothrock didn't get enough PM entertainment flicks. And I wonder if she was turning down PM roles because of that whole Stallone thing, where maybe she was getting offered more movies than just Guardian Angel with them.
And it's weird that, especially when you look at Expendables 1 and the fact that obviously it's a bunch of people that Stallone's worked with, but it's also like Gary Daniels is in there, right?
Right.
So, and then Scott Adkins is in the second one. Stallone picks Statham to be his, even though when the first Expendables came out, all Statham had done was really his straight-to-video action stuff. He wasn't the star that he is today.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like Stallone keeps up with, who's in action. You know what I mean? He got Van Damme back to do the villain in part 2. And then something happens in 3 where I'm like, but the formula is that it's all these older guys. And it's not like you don't have people to pick from. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like God forbid, but he could have got Seagal, right? I know Jackie Chan was playing hardball about it needs to be a starring vehicle for me and da. But he probably could have talked Jackie into it. He talked Bruce Willis and Schwarzenegger into showing up. So
Chuck Norris.
Fucking Harrison Ford. I mean, there's all sorts of people in that franchise. So it's like, you really telling me you couldn't get on the call to Cynthia Rothrock or whatever?
She would have loved to have been in it,
Right.
Like she, I kind of joke that I think because she's really short, but I think if she stood next to Stallone, she'd probably show how short he is, and maybe that's why he doesn't want her in them. But
I don't know. I mean, I remember interviewing her and being offended when I found out that she told me that the writers of there was meant to be an official female spin-off called the Expendables, which is the worst and most sexist idea I can think of. Just make an Expendables with women in it. They don't need to have Expendables or whatever. Just make an Expendables with women, and I'll put women in the cast alone.
Right.
There are other women out there. Like if Sigourney Weaver showed up or Linda Hamilton showed up or any of these so-called action stars, no one would complain. So let's put a real action star in there. But the writers of Expendables came to Cynthia's home apparently and did a bunch of writing with her and asked her about like what she'd like to see in a female-driven action movie and blah 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 blah, with no intention of ever putting her in the film.
Wow.
And she's got a better heart than I have, because I would have kicked them the fucking door. I don't let this a part of me. And it's similar, like Pam Grier told me. She was like, when I spoke to Pam Grier at her book signing, she said like, yep, there was talk of me and others being in a female Expendables movie, but it's not going to happen. And I'm like, well, it's because they're thinking of it as a female Expendables movie, instead of just realizing that females can be mercenaries too. It's got nothing to do with gender or,
Well, and I think that's the thing, maybe as we come back and kind of as we're starting to kind of wrap up here, I think with Rothrock that makes her so compelling is that, yes, she's great as a, from a female action standpoint, she kind of stands alone. I mean, again, like I said, I put her right behind Pam Grier and Michelle Yeoh, but that also, just as a pure martial artist and action star, she is up there with any, I would take the Pepsi challenge with her and any of the guy stars that we think of out there.
Oh yeah, hands down, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe the thing that makes her so compelling when you watch these. And I think it is a shame that she was never used she never got like that big screen. I mean, the closest I think she came after the Stallone film was Irresistible Force, that they made a pilot and it didn't get picked up by CBS.
The other one that she did, which was sort of Hollywood adjacent, right, is the Corey Haim vehicles, Fast Getaways 1 and 2. Yeah.
Right, with Leo Rossi. So I mean, I think she never quite got that role that she should have gotten. And I think part of it is, I think Hollywood or the film industry, they just don't know necessarily how to do I think I don't think maybe they just didn't know how to split the difference maybe between having her be a strong female lead and be a female and be a woman.
Well, if you notice, when we talk about others that Hollywood has produced, whether it's Xena, whether it's Buffy, whether it's Terminator, whether it's Alien, those are all genre films.
Right, exactly.
They're basically saying women can be action stars in the future or in space or in, fantasy Greek times or whatever, wherever Xena's set. But they can't be female. Like, Soderbergh tried it with Haywire and Carano, and, packed the cast with like every famous person he'd ever worked with to try and get that movie off the ground with her. And it didn't fly. I mean, it's a good movie. I like it, but it didn't fly. And you can count on one hand how many female leading superhero movies, and they are sci-fi fantasy genre films. So why are even when you look at Lord of the Rings, you can spit and hit maybe just one or two strong women. The rest of the women are elves or sages or whatever. So it's just it's very sad. I've never understood it. I don't get it. There's something along the lines of like I say, if it's a female action film, that's how they brand it. Oh, well, this is an action film, but it has females in it, rather than it just being an action film that happened to be led by, one of the strongest, most compelling martial artists on the planet. And yet it still has to be like, hey, it's the same with Ghostbusters, like the female Ghostbusters. There was, and even if I put it in my article, I'm like, the one thing that came out of it was seeing, girls and women at the premiere feeling like they finally had a comedy for them. But on the flip side of that, it's like, right, but make a comedy for them, not a Ghostbusters movie, right? So, or if you're going to do a female Ghostbusters movie, have it be a Ghostbusters movie, not a female Ghostbusters movie, and have them be another group of Ghostbusters, with the original cast, so that the afterlife, when it came out, doesn't feel like, don't worry, lads, we've got men back in the movie again. Right, exactly. It's not about the gender. It's about the content and the intent of the film. And, we're lucky to have the Rothrock films we do. And we're lucky that, Vinegar Syndrome and others are putting their money where their mouth is and releasing more of these. I know a couple of the guys now from the archive in Connecticut who run Vinegar Syndrome, and they're all big PM Entertainment fans. They obviously struck a deal with Jalal Murray and got Talons of the Eagle and TC 2000 and some of the ones he made with Billy Blanks. So that's a start. They obviously got Righting Wrongs. They got Tiger Claws. They got Martial Law. So, you know, they cast Rothrock in New York Ninja, which was their first film. So they're fans. They've got her number. They know, you know, so fingers crossed. I mean, maybe, I don't know who owns PM now and what. Like, I know Echo Bridge and a couple of others like bought up a bunch of those PM Entertainment movies. But those big box sets you used to buy of like 50 action movies and 10 of them would be PM. Right. Those have sort of gone by the wayside. They've not made the leap to Blu-ray or 4K or anything. Like the Echo Bridges and the Mill Creeks of the world are not still putting out those big box sets where you could maybe pick up, you know, the Tracy Lord PM Entertainment movies or whatever. Right. But there's a great example. They put Tracy Lord in a bunch of PM Entertainment movies, but not Rothrock. I'm like, right. Listen, love Tracy Lords, but like, what's her claim to action fame?
Yeah, or like Anna Nicole Smith, they do 2 action movies, in which, granted, Skyscraper is like a legitimately good action movie. I mean, it's one of my favorite PM Entertainment flicks, but it's like they're like pushing Anna Nicole Smith over the goal line. Like, there's a YouTube video that shows all the outtakes, and like one of the reasons why I think she was a helicopter pilot was that she could wear a headset and they could feed her lines. You know, and you watch that and you think like, okay, well, you know. Yeah, Rothrock should have gotten those roles. And I don't know if maybe, too, like if you look at maybe from a time standpoint that maybe she was in Indonesia when PM had the roles for her and she couldn't make them. Because, you know, the Rage and Honor movie that she makes, Rage and Honor 2, she makes 2 other movies. She makes the 2 Lady Dragons in Indonesia.
Yeah, and I felt like Rage and Honor 2, there was a bunch of sets that look almost identical to Lady Dragon. In fact, I think the big stately home they use for the guy who gets shot, the dad, yeah. I think that is also in Lady Dragon. I think that's where they have that big party where Rothrock and Norton meet again in Rage and Honor 2. I'm pretty sure that is in Lady Dragon.
I think it's where she goes to the party and she confronts Ginty with the and then she escapes on the motorcycle. Which, I mean, that was a really great scene. I mean, that was some really great scenes there. So yeah, I hopefully people and I think because what's happening on the site is that she's going to get her 40th movie on the site soon. So she's going to be in the 40 club. She'll be only the 3rd actor to be in there after Dolph Lundgren and Gary Daniels. So kind of when she gets this, we'll be doing some podcasts at the same time. So it'll be kind of like a mini Rothrock celebration here. But I mean, the thing is, I think the people who listen to the podcast and check out the blog and all of that, they know Rothrock. They're huge fans of her.
Right.
But I think it would be nice to get more people to kind of,
Well, I know for a fact that Sworn to Justice is coming out because I think she posted that she's done a commentary for it. So I think Sworn to Justice. I wouldn't be surprised if Vinegar Syndrome don't announce that before the end of the year. She also hinted at Righting Wrongs, and then that came out about 3 months later. Yeah. So I don't know what else they have in terms of what they've bought or what they own, but it seems to me now that along with a lot of the indie partners they have and a lot of the horror they're still putting out, they tend to put out like 1 or 2 action titles now every time they announce stuff. I mean, like I say, they did all the Billy Blanks. They did a lot of the Jalal Mary stuff. They've done some Rothrock.
Action USA.
So Action USA, right, exactly. And look, Action USA, 4,000 units sold out. Righting Wrongs will sell out. I guarantee it. They're sought after titles that, action fans have talked in hushed tones about in the background for decades, and now we're getting their due. So I say onwards and upwards. I think that we might see Rothrock doing, like I say, I look at her IMDb and she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies in either pre-production, post-production, or filming.
Yeah, one of them is Taken from Rio Bravo is one that I think Art Camacho is directing it. So it's one of those Nevsky produced ones. So, we'll take that for one. So we'll see what happens there. But
Joe Cornett is directing it.
Oh, so maybe he's doing stunts on that one. Maybe that's he was posting. Maybe it was the other Rio. There's another Rio. I mean, I think it's like 2 Rio Bravo movies that Nevsky's making. But he was posting on his Instagram some like behind the scenes for. So maybe he's just choreographer. He's the choreographer for it. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them look to be, pretty low budget and a bit weird. She's in a Michael Madsen, Tom Sizemore, Eric Roberts, and I can't. Stacy Keach, Daryl Hannah, Robert Davi, Jesus.
Yeah.
In a movie called Buckle Up, which looks to be like a Fast and Furious ripoff.
Right.
But I'm amazed that it's 2022 and the
Yeah.
poster for Buckle Up looks like it's 1989. Like I'm like, what? No one in low budget filmmaking knows how to do Photoshop? Like what the fuck, guys? I could go out and take a photo with my iPhone that looks better than that.
Yeah, it's got the London Bridge there. Italian Job meets Fast and Furious. Yeah, it's
It all seems to be done on green screen as well, which is a very worrying. That's how you get the cast, because you just go, I'll pay you 20 grand to show up and stand in front of a green screen for 40 minutes, and then we put you in the movie. So, I mean, yeah, she needs to look. I'm excited that she's still working. She needs to get away from these fucking films.
Yeah.
And and maybe that's another thing, is maybe the fact that she was between the rock and a hard place, which was a Cynthia Roth rock and a hard place, which is that. You either work, right? So you either do these work in these low budget movies, but you feel like the more you play in that field, and Atkins is coming across this as well.
Yeah.
The more you keep doing that, the harder it is to break into the Hollywood mainstream, because they feel like you're tainted with like the B movie virus, right?
Right.
And Atkins is finding this, and Jesse Johnson is finding this, and I think a lot of them find this where it's like, look at the work we're doing, and now we're ready for the next step.
Yeah.
And no one's giving the next step to them, and the closest they get is, like I say, a cameo in The Expendables, or stunt work on a Mission Impossible or whatever it is. And I think maybe that's it. Maybe it's the more picky and choosy you are, the less you work, and the more you work, the less they want you to be. So it's sort of Anyway, that's my final thing on it. But
yeah, I mean, I think the Daniels Expendables thing is maybe a great example, because he was chosen to have like a very small role in that film, and then he kind of impressed Stallone with some of the ideas that he had for where his character should be standing and things like that, and they beefed up the role some. Or like John Wick, right? The third John Wick, DeCascos was only supposed to have a small part, and then I guess the main baddie backed out, so they had him step in. And I think people are starting to see what we've known for years about all of these names. And so, yeah, so maybe that's what it's going to take for Rothrock, or any of them, that they get that one little, that break that they didn't get earlier in their career. And yeah, people see them in something and say, okay, yeah, this is what we're.
But no, definitely watch Rage and Honor. Definitely delve into the Rothrock canon. There's plenty to enjoy. I think the sweet spot is 86 to 96. I think that's where she kind of does her best work. I think we've mentioned most of her strong titles in this film, but in this podcast rather. But my top ones are Yes Man and Righting Wrongs, Martial Law 2, Guardian Angel, China O'Brien, and then probably Rage and Honor in that kind of order. So yeah, I would check out any of those, but check out all of them. I did a long time ago. I did a Rothrock binge watch, and found I had a friend of mine send me as many Rothrock digital things that he could find, and I got stuff like Fight to Win and some of like the Godfrey Ho and Leo Fong stuff that she made, and even that stuff. She does what she can in those movies.
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, to some extent, maybe I need to sort of practice what I preach about, talking about wanting to get the word out about her, because the only other podcast that I've done about Rothrock before this one, and the one that with Tom Joliffe that doing around the same time, is I did a top 5 Rothrock films with the guys from Comeuppets, Ty and Brett there, or Bosch, and so that's the only other time I've done a Rothrock, and so I probably should be kind of doing more like, hey, somebody want to come on and talk about, because you reached out to me and you were like, hey, did you want to do Rage and Honor? And I was like, yeah, sure. And they're like, yeah, do you want to do it on your show? And it's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's.
Yeah, I do it on here because, as I say, the After Movie Diner is ending.
Right. Yeah, so exactly.
The After Movie Diner is over. I'm not doing it anymore.
Right. So. Right. But so that's why we're here to do this. But I think it's part me having to sort of keep put my money where my mouth is too, and be like, okay, I'm gonna do more Rothrock. And I think part of the thing is I've kind of exhausted a lot of her films. I mean, I've kind of dug deep into the catalog to get a lot of hers on the site, and now it is kind of like Cool Cats, or something like that that's left to review. So there isn't much left there. And so that part of it kind of slows down.
You've seen more than I have, and I've seen a ton. But
yeah. this will be 40 movie. I'm going to do Inspector Wears Skirts. Probably by the time this is reviewed, it'll already be posted. But that'll be the 40th film on the site for her. So yeah, and I mean then it'll be probably digging into the Cool Cat, and whether or not I do the Cool Cat kids whatever thing, or probably martial arts kids. I'll do some of those, but yeah.
Well, I liked what was the other one I just picked up? Eureka just put out a really good Millionaires Express or Shanghai Express.
Right, that's what I've got to do. Yeah.
So I have that. I have the Eureka disc of that. It's import, so it's a bit more expensive, but really, really nice package. I also picked up Prince of the Sun and what's the other Hong Kong? Magic Crystal.
Yeah,
I picked those two up on Hong Kong Blu-ray because I have a multi-region, so I just picked up whatever I could that was available. But yeah, Inspector Wears Skirts is still kind of just floating around digitally. You can't really find that streaming anywhere or.
No, Inspector Wears Skirts is actually Tubi has it now.
Okay, nice. Okay,
yeah,
good.
So they just got it recently, so that's why I've been meaning to watch it.
Amazon had City Cops, is it?
Yeah.
Amazon had that, I think, for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, they're kind of floating around out there, but I think for people, I think you're right. I think that mid '90s period. I think when you get earlier than mid '80s, I think like that's where you start to get into like Magic Crystal and some of those, and I think those are fun ones. I mean, if you want to hear Norton with somebody dubbing him with a bad like Italian, I think it's Italian or Latin American accent. I don't know what the accent is supposed to be for him, or Russian. But the bad dubbing for him is fantastic. But I mean, it's all great martial arts stuff that they do in those movies. So it's like the movie's ridiculous, has really bad slapstick Hong Kong humor in it.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, she starts off in 85. So I've been saying 86 to 96, but it's really 85 to 96 then, I guess, because Yes, Madam's fantastic. Millionaires
That's a good point. Yes, Madam.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Righting Wrongs is fantastic. Magic Crystal is okay.
Yeah.
And Prince of the Sun is okay, but her best Hong Kong stuff is Yes, Madam, Millionaires Express, and Righting Wrongs. If you watch nothing else, watch those three.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think, for what's available on the streaming sites, I mean, you can't do much worse than Rage and Honor films. Or no, sorry, you can't do much better than I think you can't do much better than the Rage and Honor films. I think they're a good pair. They just kind of do exactly what you want from a 90s actioner, and sometimes you can't ask for more than that.
Yeah. Have you seen No Witnesses, by the way?
I haven't. No, I don't. I think I've seen it on here, and I think I looked it up, but I have not.
Wow. It's a Leo Fong joint with Stack Pierce and Rothrock and Steve Quimby.
Yeah.
Never even heard of it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it was ever released. The funny thing about 24 Hours to Midnight is that was one that was never released because I think she quit the production like early on. Right. And then Fong had somebody dig up the print of it. I guess the guy who actually had to go dig it up, he hurt his back and still has back problems from having to dig up the reels. But he then took that, spliced it, put a woman in a ninja costume and said, "This is Rothrock," and finish the movie off. So I can't even imagine what No Witnesses is. It lists. Oh, you know what's interesting about Witnesses? It lists Powder Chan. It lists Stack Pierce as Powder Chan. So yeah. I'm wondering if he recut 24 Hours to Midnight and sold it in China as
probably
something new. Because he did that with the other movies he made with Rothrock. He did it with Undefeatable. He recut that and made it something like Bloody Mary or something. Cut it with somebody else in the film, and also honoring.
It's remarkable she kept working with him, really.
Yeah.
Considering, yeah.
Right. Yeah. He essentially Richard Harrisoned her.
Right.
With not to the same degree, but he just took the movies he made with her, just recut them and re-released them as something different in China. So or in Hong Kong. So. Yeah, it's fascinating what Godfrey Ho does with movies. Like it's like, yeah, that I didn't realize that until I started looking into it a little bit more. And I think that might be maybe Leo Fong may have done the same thing with this No Witnesses movie.
Yeah, and no, it's all good. It's all good, dude. I have to jump, but this has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
I will talk Rothrock anytime you want, and watch the space as to what happens with the After Movie Diner. But I'm still writing reviews. I'm just not podcasting much anymore. But I'll come on and guest on your show whenever you need me to. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, no, thank you again for coming on. Yeah, we'll have the links in the thing for After Movie Diner and for also your Bandcamp as well. But yeah, thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, if you like John's music, you're going to hear the theme song as we go out here. But thanks everybody. Have a good one.
Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.